Chapter 26. Want to have sex for free? You might as well try first to see if you can take off the head on my neck. New book. Please vote for flowers. When Romon returned to Hogwarts again. Although Hogwarts hasn't started school yet, there are obviously a lot of people here. The most important thing is that everyone here is either of high status or an extremely sophisticated top wizard. The huge restaurant, which was originally supposed to be used for students to dine, was temporarily transformed into a place similar to a conference hall. Of course, Romon would rather regard the furnishings here as a trial court. Romon understood what was left in the middle position, as well as the looks from the wizards in the British wizarding world who wanted to tear him alive. I want to achieve my goals today. Just relying on words and exchange of interests is definitely not enough. But in just a moment, the crisp sound of Romon's polished expensive leather shoes and the floor could be heard calmly in the hall. This young man, who looked like an ordinary young wizard who had just graduated, was under the watchful eye of a pair of topperers from the Ministry of Magic, a hidden elite of the Death Eaters, or the head of a pureblood wizarding family. He walked calmly to the lonely location. He calmly placed the suitcase in his hand at his feet and unbuttoned his suit. Sitting there calmly before Fudge, Dumbledore and others sitting in the seats above could speak, Romon said something on the spot that caused an instant uproar in the place. The weather is nice today, and it seems like a good choice to watch the ants' sad comedy, so please start your show. One sentence instantly ignited the anger of the already extremely repressed wizards in the British wizarding world. Fake, shameless bastard. You're already here, and you still dare to be so arrogant? Fudge, execute him. Execute him immediately. Yes, execute him immediately. Such a filthy maggot is not even worthy of being in Azkaban. I must let you taste my unforgivable curse. I want your life to be worse than death. Romon Kowalski, sitting in the seats of the American wizarding delegation, the Addams family, Little Gothic Wednesday, looked at Romon sitting elegantly in the judgment seat, as if he was sitting in the seat of a god. The look of mocking and teasing ants, with a dark and vicious personality, the corners of her mouth not only turned up in a happy arc at this moment. Silver Knight, Romon Kowalski, you are truly a born genius and a bad guy, and you are worthy of being my favorite spouse. The soft murmur was heard by Mrs. Addams on the side, who not only did not object at all. Instead, he spoke in a low voice with a look of approval and even encouragement. My dear little cutie, when faced with such a man, all you have to do is to take him down early before the little bitches around him are aware of it. Youth is not a problem. After saying that, Mrs. Addams hugged her husband in public with a happy face and kissed him deeply. Dear, you are really the best gift Satan has given me. Such flirtatious behavior is quite shocking in the American wizarding world. The wizards around him turned their heads away. Seeing the scene that was almost out of control, Fudge, who was sitting on the seat, slammed the table anxiously. Quiet, quiet. I don't know how long I shouted, but the abuse directed at Romon finally gradually died down. However, almost everyone in the British wizarding world looked at Romon with clear murderous intent in their eyes. Among the crowd, Lucius stood together with several wizard patriarchs of pureblood families, looking at Romon with gloomy eyes. Why does this guy look almost unchanged even after more than 10 years? On the contrary, they all looked like uncles and aunts. That bastard Romon is too dangerous. Even in Slytherin, there will never be anyone more dangerous than him. I will never allow my child to study in the magic school where he exists. A patriarch gritted his teeth and spoke. Lucius said nothing, but his eyes were equally wary. That was a warning against Romon, the former ruler of Hogwarts. This guy, during the 6 years he was in school, suppressed all their colleges by himself and could not hold his head high. Mr. Romon, please pay attention to your words and deeds. Although we have arranged for your personal protection here today, it does not mean that you can rub salt on other people's wounds at will. Fudge was talking about the situation, but he didn't dare to answer Romon's words for the next moment. Get to the point. Although Mr. Romon, you caused huge irreparable losses to the British wizarding world. The matter has been done, and now we can only try to make up for it. When Fudge asked Romon to take out a more effective potion and share it with the public to reduce his guilt. Although some people immediately protested at the scene, he shouted loudly that he didn't want the potion and wanted to execute the Silver Demon King. However, it is clear that a large number of people chose to remain silent. This phenomenon made Fudge, Dumbledore and others unprecedentedly happy. The extreme Silver Knight affected a wide range of people, but after all, only a small number of people suffered irreversible consequences. For example, the Weasleys present, after hearing Fudge's proposal, were very dissatisfied with Romon's intervention, which caused them to give birth to a young son without preparation, making the family's life even more difficult. However, what if there was a magical potion that was cheap and could benefit them? It's not that they can't let go of their grudges. After all, even now, the British wizarding world, even wizards all over the world, and the top potion masters have united, but they have not been able to crack the ridiculous potion of the Silver Knight. Even, at one point someone thought so. The source of the extreme Silver Knight is a bottle of potion, which is simply nonsense. Everyone cursed and hated Romon, the Silver Demon, but they had to admit it. In terms of potions, the other party said that he was second. It was really not easy for the entire wizarding world to find a first. However, just when most people were in such a mood and were ready to let go of their prejudices against Romon. Romon's words once again caused an uproar in the scene. I saw him shaking his head repeatedly after Fudge finished speaking, with a sarcastic smile on his face. It is undeniable that Minister Fudge is very sincere in your proposal, but unfortunately, I don't like your choice of words. Fudge was taken aback for a moment, his face flushed with embarrassment. Romon didn't give the other side face at all. I have a lot of potions, and as long as I have enough materials, I can make potions that increase lifespan without side effects. But my potions will not be used for so-called compensation. I, the Silver Devil, Romon Kowalski, will not give any compensation to any ant. Want to buy potions from me for nothing? You might as well try to see if you can remove the head from my neck first. Chapter 27. An olive branch from the United States Ministry of Magic, equivalent to ministerial level, requesting data for new book. Lucius Malfoy, F.K., this madman. Wednesday Addams, cool. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, this damn, dirty bastard has no human heart at all. Did Fudge get played by that woman too much at night? He actually let such a bastard out? At the moment Romon said these words with obvious provocative meaning, the entire hall was engulfed in unprecedented fierce abuse. The terrifying sound waves made Fudge and the others feel overwhelmed. Even Dumbledore stopped him several times and signaled everyone to be quiet, but with little effect. On the other side, representatives of the American wizarding community became nervous when they saw the British wizards becoming increasingly angry. Under the look of the leader, atop a captain in a suit, he moved closer to Romon without leaving any trace. At the same time, some people were covering each other, and some people were secretly preparing to release magic spells such as armor protection at any time to help Romon withstand the sudden attack that he might suffer next. In fact, the British wizarding community here is indeed obviously out of control. Among them, in addition to some dark wizards, Jason Vincent, the patriarch of the Vincent family and one of the patriarchs of the pureblood wizard family, reacted the most intensely. Ignoring the pull and stop of Lucius beside him, he walked through the crowded crowd and came to the front of the team regardless of his appearance. Blocked by the arrows, he looked at Romon, who was close at hand with a mocking smile on his face, and his eyes were splitting. That's the bastard. That's the bastard. Only on that extremely silver night would something like that happen to his wife and his brother. Fuck. Romon Kowalski, I challenge you to a duel. I'm going to have a wizard duel to the death with you. You little son of a bitch. If you dare to agree, I will kill you. Even Fudge and Dumbledore will never be able to protect you. A series of angry roars finally made Romon's eyes turn to him. I saw the other party finally getting up from the lonely seat. Wow, Senior Vincent, with your appearance now, if I hadn't seen your family's emblem, I wouldn't have recognized you. Where's your hair? The way you look now is like a big peeled potato. Well, a purebrand potato. Jason Vincent's face turned red with anger, and he immediately took out his wand regardless of the obstruction of the arrays around him. Damn bastard. If you have the guts, come to the duel with me. I must let you damn Yankee know that without these two old bastards Fudge and Dumbledore, you are nothing. Jason was furious when he thought about his son, whose biological father only his family knew. The thought of killing Romon made him even more crazy. Even Lucius and several other pureblood family patriarchs who were held back by the crowd were suddenly startled when they heard Jason's voice. If they had such a direct conflict with Dumbledore, the strongest white wizard, they might not have enough strength to deal with it. Without waiting for Dumbledore to say anything, this time it was the American wizards who came for Romon, and they were the first to become unable to sit still. The leading captain stopped directly in front of Romon, with sharp eyes warning the crazy Jason in front of him. This gentleman, please pay attention to your behavior. The person you are facing, Mr. Romon Kowalski, is the 4-star potion chief of our U.S. Department of Magic, who enjoys the same level of treatment as the Minister of the U.S. Department of Magic. Every drop of spit you spit out now will become an unforgivable curse on other members of your family in the future. The stern warning was something no one expected. What surprised everyone present was even more. Romon, this silver demon actually has the same identity as the United States Minister of Magic! This scene, let alone the wizards present, did not expect it. In fact, even Romon, Fudge, Dumbledore and others on the stage did not expect it. And this captain, also in front of everyone's astonished gaze, solemnly took out a document from the space folding pocket, which had a gold-plated dragon skin and a document of a ferocious thunderbird printed on it. Handed it to Romon. Sir, originally in our plan, this document was to be handed over to you after the end of today, but the current situation ... For your safety, please return to the United States with us Wizarding World. Please rest assured that we have a total of 100 Elytras present. They all left suicide notes when they left the headquarters. Even if all of us lose our lives, we will definitely protect you, sir, and return safely. The sonorous and powerful voices, and the powerful aura exuded by these 100 American eras as soon as they finished speaking, made the British wizards present secretly gasp. Elite must be elite, regardless of the degree of concentration of magic power, or the sense of oppression emanating from one's own spirit. There is no doubt that these people are truly the elite of the American Ministry of Magic. Watch it. Those rednecks in America ... Are they really crazy? For a silver demon, god, I must be out of my mind. How could anyone be willing to take the lives of so many elites and give them such high treatment, just to compete for such scum? The low-pitched exclamations and various discussions made the scene chaotic in an instant. Fudge, who was sitting on the stage, finally realized that the situation was not good and hurriedly pulled Dumbledore aside. Professor Dumbledore, did I hear you wrong just now? That person said. Four-star potion master? Is there such a position in the United States Ministry of Magic? Dumbledore shook his head, but after thinking about it casually, his complexion couldn't help but become a little dignified. Fudge, I'm afraid, we still underestimated Mr. Romon, the allure of the American wizarding community. The situation in the U.S. Ministry of Magic and ours has always been similar, and the job levels are also divided into 3 levels, including the same goes for the ranks of the Order of Merlin. This 4-star potion general staff is probably specially set up to win Romon to work for the American wizarding world. Hiss. Fudge gasped. He stared blankly at the calm young man in front of him, who could still deal with all kinds of accusations and abuse around him at will. Although the other party's equal treatment with ministers is worth a lot of money, it is open to question. However, there is no doubt that the young man in front of him has successfully reached the same height as them. Chapter 28 Silver Demon King? No. He is the real devil. Requesting flowers for new book at the scene. The era captain of the United States Ministry of Magic took out the certificate of appointment for Romon and read it in public. No matter how reluctant they were to believe it, everyone present had to admit it. They wished that the silver demon who had broken his bones and sucked his marrow, the demon who created the terrifying Silver Knight more than 10 years ago, had really become a big figure in the United States Ministry of Magic, who would try their best to protect him even if there was a war. But here, under the personal service of the era captain, Romon put on a cape with a golden sun pattern and a suit that showed nobility. The patriarch of the Vincent family, whose looks are not good enough and extremely vulgar. At this moment, he was facing Romon, who was still smiling and staring at him calmly. As well as the meaningful glances of the Americaners beside him, they suddenly became hesitant. Although that stupid sun crab is not his son at all. But fortunately, it was also the child of his wife and his biological brother, and she had a certain blood relationship with him. In addition, Vincent's family is not very good looking, and outsiders have no idea of these secrets. When I thought about being here today, I would break up with Romon and start fighting. He will bring terrible disaster to the family immediately. Senior Vincent, it seems that you were among the outstanding graduates of that Slytherin class. Wow, I'm really looking forward to it. Romon's words made Jason sweat instantly. The mind that was previously overwhelmed by anger also woke up immediately. I mean, Romon raised his eyebrows teasingly. Are you scared? You must be kidding, right? Senior Vincent, I was already in Azkaban when I was in 6th grade. You don't have the confidence to deal with me like this, right? Faced with Romon's sarcasm, as well as the eyes around him that seemed to penetrate him, Jason's face suddenly turned red, and just when he didn't know what to say, the voice of his friend Lucius came. Mr. Romon, I think I want to apologize to Jason. In fact, it's all my fault. This guy is really not good at drinking. He. Lucius smiled, trying to calm down. However, there was no smile on Romon's face. With his arms folded across his chest, there were so many Americaners standing around him, with calm faces, looking at each other as if they were clowns. Seeing that the other party finally stopped laughing, he sneered and spoke. What a nostalgic face. Wow, Malfoy. A voice full of weird accents, accompanied by words that made Lucius's face turn slightly pale, as if he thought of some painful memory, came out of Romon's mouth. To be honest, after losing you, I have to suffer every day. Romon took a step forward and gently pressed a hand on Lucius's shoulder. I wonder if Romon is too powerful, or maybe Lucius was mentally suppressed in some way. The latter's body instantly stooped. In his sight was a pair of protagonists that woke him up countless times at night. A pair of shiny leather shoes. In other words, it's Romon's leather shoes. How did you do it back then? The polished leather shoes were cleaner than the magic spell that made them look brand new. Lucius. That's enough. Romon. We are also alumni after all. A figure rushed out from behind the crowd and ripped Lucius away from Romon's hand. But it was Lucius's wife, Narcissa Malfoy. But at this moment, the people around him were shocked to find that the person from before was in the eyes of outsiders. One is associated with words such as arrogance, viciousness, arrogance, etc., like Lucius, a poisonous snake that can bite people at any time. At this moment, it seemed as if he had been greatly frightened. He cowered in his wife's arms in horror, his pursed lips trembling violently, and his pale cheek muscles trembling. Romon curled his lips in boredom. I won't continue to pretend. Ha, Silver Demon King. Good devil. A good reputation can be tiring if you have too much of it, but a bad reputation can save you a lot of unnecessary trouble. He looked around and his eyes rested on Minister Fudge, who was on the stage and no longer knew how to control the situation. Mr. Minister, I would like to put the matter on hold for today. Compared with the development of pharmaceuticals, I think there is a way to make it easier for these ignorant fools to understand how to accept reality. Fudge was helpless. Romon had already turned to look at the British wizards behind him. There were at least 1,000 people gathered here at this moment. But even so, it was only a fraction of the total number of victims who had actually endured the extreme silver night. Romon's eyes swept over everyone. The wizard family members who appeared in the plot all had obviously something wrong with their auras, and they should be Death Eaters who had sneaked in. There are also some shop owners in Diagon Alley, as well as individual wizards and the like. After seeing Romon's gaze, these people first looked back angrily, and then hurriedly turned their heads aside as if they had some concerns. One by one, their heads are like the blown wheat fields. As Romon's eyes swept across, they all swayed uneasily. Mrs. Weasley also felt that something was wrong in the atmosphere at this moment. The couple hid at the back of the crowd, but they knew exactly what was happening in front. What do you mean? What is this Romon going to do? Is he planning to let the Auras in the United States take action against us? Arthur Weasley shook his head. This idea was crushed by him at the first opportunity. Based on their understanding of this junior, Romon is not such a fool. He wouldn't be unaware that those American Auras would only be responsible for his safety and would not fight directly. Instead, he immediately took him and evacuated to the American wizarding world. As long as they don't hunt them down, Romon won't be able to use the power of the United States Ministry of Magic to take revenge on them. However, even after thinking this, the uneasy feeling in my heart became stronger and stronger. I, the Silver Devil, Romon Goldstein Kowalski. 7 days later, in the Hogwarts arena. Accept everyone's challenge. You can fight with me alone, you can fight with 2 of you, of course, you can also fight with 1,000 people, or 10,000 people together. Destroy or kill me. I'm waiting for you. Chapter 29. The whole world is shocked. Are you going to challenge the entire wizarding world when you get out of prison? Exclamation mark. I, the Silver Devil, Romon Goldstein Kowalski. 7 days later, in the Hogwarts arena. Accept everyone's challenge. You can fight with me alone, you can fight with 2 of you, of course, you can also fight with 1,000 people, or 10,000 people together. Destroy or kill me. I'm waiting for you. After deliberately applying magic to his voice, Romon's voice at this moment was even clearer than when wizards had applied amplifying spells. It can be said that everyone present can definitely hear it clearly. However, when Romon finished speaking, everyone present had dull expressions on their faces, with expressions of extreme disbelief. As if they heard something from the Arabian Nights, they just stared blankly at each other. After a brief silence, there was a burst of suppressed whispers or discussions. Watch it. Benjamin, did you hear what that guy said? Merlin is here. I think I must have heard it wrong. God, I heard that guy from the Silver Demon King threaten to challenge us all. Ahahaha, this dream is so strange. I must want to kill this guy so much. I must. Ouch, it hurts. Hiss. There was also an uproar at the representative seat of the American wizarding world. Is he really crazy? Gothic little Lily Wednesday, the little madman who plays games every day, either burying his brother alive, or playing the dismemberment game with his brother with a big knife, heard Romon's words at this moment. He was also shocked to say such words. Mrs. Adams was already hugging tightly with her husband again nervously. The latter was obviously suffocated by the other party's hug, but the expression on his face was a perverted enjoyment. Mrs. Weasley also covered her mouth in shock at the moment. She stared blankly at her husband, who was also completely confused. Arthur, that kid, I'm afraid he was cursed. Arthur Weasley didn't speak, but his expression showed that he was also thinking about this possibility. Challenge the entire British wizarding world? Exclamation mark. God, such a crazy thing, let alone Dumbledore. Anyway, Arthur himself didn't believe that Merlin, the god of magic, had such strength. Not to mention, the Silver Demon King in front of him has been imprisoned in Azkaban since the 6th grade. I'm afraid it's not because he's been locked inside for too long, and his brain has also broken down. Dang. Mr. Romon, do you know what you are talking about now? On the stage, Fudge, the Minister of Magic, also had a tingling scalp. Dumbledore also stood up slowly and sighed quietly. Mr. Romon, it's better not to joke about this kind of thing on such occasions. If you are tired, today's discussion on the development of pharmaceuticals can be temporarily postponed. However, Dumbledore wasn't done talking. Professor Dumbledore, look at me now. Do I look like I'm joking? Romon's eyes were cold, and the light of reason reflected in his pupils made the voices at the scene gradually become suppressed. Even the American captain, Smith, whose expression changed wildly at this moment. Pulling Romon, he spoke softly. Mr. Romon, we understand that you are imprisoned, and there is resentment in your heart, but the headquarters has not had any extra power in the recent period, which can cause large-scale conflicts with the British Ministry of Magic. You, Captain Smith, you don't seem to understand what I just said. Romon looked at the other party with calm eyes, and then glanced around the shocked crowd. The sound gradually grew louder. I mean, in 7 days, I will accept the challenge of all the wizards in the British wizarding world by myself. Whether it's a dark wizard or an Aura from your Ministry of Magic, whether it's you yourself or your entire family of wizards, I am alone, waiting for you. All wizards. Romon left, leaving behind explosive news that could shock the entire British wizarding world, and even the wizarding communities of various countries. Back to London. The goth girl Wednesday also followed Romon with her mother's encouragement. As a result, Romon can no longer stay in the Granger family temporarily. However, fortunately, He has a lot of property in the Mole World, on the outskirts of London, in an elegantly decorated manor. When Romon woke up and had breakfast in the morning, he received a copy of the Daily Prophet from the Wizarding World. The lead writer is still the chief reporter, Rita Skeeter. This annoying woman. The pungent writing given at the beginning of the article made Romon's eyebrows slightly raised. How? It must be terrible, but I have to say that the entire British Wizarding World has been challenged by one person. Regardless of the outcome of this matter, the British Wizarding World will be laughed at by the whole world. While talking on Wednesday, he was cutting the steak on the plate, with a cruel arc on the corner of his mouth, which made Romon think for a while that this girl put his brother on the table. Hee, whatever you want, but I really like the beginning of this newspaper. Wednesday glanced at it. The Daily Prophet. 13 years ago, the Silver Knight brought nightmares to the entire British Wizarding World. 13 years later, the Silver Demon King tried to turn his terror into dark clouds and cover the entire British sky. Romon enjoys a peaceful breakfast, looking out the window at London's perennially rainy day. The corners of the mouth could not help but rise slightly. To be the devil cloud that hangs over the mind of every English wizard. Hee, what an interesting thing. Breakfast is over. Romon couldn't wait to enter his space-folding suitcase, when Wednesday, who came with him, saw the weird deformed obscurant. The smile on his face became excited. They didn't care about the meaning of existence of these deformed lives at all. What are you doing? Romon kept waving his hands with a smile, setting up unbreakable spells around him, and at the same time brought the number 3 obscure, whose magic factor had reached its limit, into it. Looking at the strange body writhing restlessly, there was an excited smile on the corner of his mouth. Obtain the power that matches the identity of the Devil King. It looks like you succeeded. A somewhat embarrassed Wednesday came over curiously. Romon smiled and nodded. Only the last step is left. The power of shadow will be perfectly controlled by me, Shadow Demon King. Ha. Albus, why didn't you stop him? Merlin. Is there anything crazier than challenging the entire wizarding world by one person? At Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall was not at the school that day and was busy with the enrollment of new students. After coming back, I was shocked by what Romon did. Dumbledore, calm down Minerva, it's not as bad as you say, it's just a challenge to the British wizarding community. Just the British wizarding world? Oh, my god, haha, I forgot about Professor Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of this century. Can you do it easily? Dumbledore. Chapter 31 Romon's Hogwarts Studying History. Please vote for new book review. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster's Office. Dumbledore looked at the furious Professor McGonagall in front of him, and for the first time his face showed an emotion called powerlessness. This kind of situation has never happened to Grindelwald, his old friend of the first-generation Dark Lord who took the wrong path. He can always think of solutions and strategies for dealing with problems. This is the wisdom of his white wizard. But I can't see him clearly. That child seems to be surrounded by a layer of fog. I can't see at all what direction he is walking in or where he is going. Minerva, that child Romon exudes an unknown that scares me. Walter? Professor McGonagall was immediately stunned by Dumbledore's words. She stared blankly at the partner in front of her, this Dumbledore whom she had admired and respected since she was young. Now fear actually came out of his mouth. Dumbledore stood up slowly. Walking to a corner of the office, a door slowly opened, revealing the pensieve he had used for many years. He tapped the wand lightly against his head, and the next moment a long string of fluorescent threads representing memory was peeled off and thrown into the pensieve. When Professor McGonagall walked over, what was playing in the pensieve was a scene from Romon's memory when he was still in school. From the 1st grade to the Silver Knight in the 6th grade. I haven't paid much special attention to this child, even though he is the godson of my old friend, but obviously, this piece of gold is so bright that even if I don't deliberately understand it, I still understand it. Everything about him at school is clear. Dumbledore murmured melancholy. In a pensieve. Romon enters Hogwarts, first year. Mr. Kowalski, magic is a profound subject. It is impossible to master it in just a few days. Professor McGonagall, standing next to Dumbledore, looked slightly solemn. In this memory, the person who said such words to Romon was himself. At that time, Romon had a childish face, but he already had the handsome and courageous mold he has today. Professor McGonagall, please test me. However, if I pass your test, I hope you can teach me more advanced spells. As you wish, Mr. Kowalski, but don't expect me to let you go just because of your excellent grades. Romon is in the 2nd grade. Professor Flitwick, thank you for these charms books, but can you give me some more difficult charms books? Flitwick was shocked. Walter, have you learned all of these? Many of these are things that only 6th graders will use. Romon nodded and hesitated. Professor Flitwick, I heard that if there is a professor's guarantee, you can enter the restricted book area to select books to borrow. Romon is in 3rd grade. Christmas dinner restaurant. Dumbledore, in view of the unity and camaraderie shown by the students of Slytherin House this school year, the hard work and enterprising spirit in the classroom, and the positive efforts that everyone has made towards the sorting cup, I want to award 100 points to Slytherin Academy. Romon stood up instantly and waved to the stiff smiling classmates around him with a smile on his face, as if he was receiving some reward. The Slytherin students, however, lowered their heads even though they had clearly won the Academy Cup. It seems like everyone is suffering from some huge shame. Romon is in 4th grade. The then potions master ran to Dumbledore's office. Professor Dumbledore, you must think of a solution. Really, that child Romon is now completely beyond the scope of our teaching. The potions he is now exposed to and researching are more dangerous than the last. If we don't do it right, I'm afraid something terrible will be created. According to my wishes, Professor Dumbledore, please order that Romon be prohibited from entering the Forbidden Forest to conduct any collecting activities. Dumbledore, standing beside the pensieve, looked slightly sad. Obviously, what the potions professor said back then was really right. A bottle of Sylvanite potion that is so absurd and terrifying that no one can crack it even now has directly affected the entire British wizarding world. It turns out that this is what regret feels like. Dumbledore sighed. After that, things about Romon became more and more out of control in the pensieve. By the time Romon was in 5th grade, there was no one in Hogwarts who could teach him about magic theory, potions, etc. Even the magic courses that were required for young wizards such as Charms course, Transfiguration Curse course, Defense Against the Dark Arts course, Potions course, etc. The professors have given Romon complete freedom. Even if you don't go to the classroom. And it was from that moment on that Dumbledore, who saw this in his eyes, felt a layer of unknown fog shrouded in Romon. Minerva, as you said, even an old guy like me would not dare to fight against the entire British wizarding world by myself. I even believe that even Voldemort in his heyday would never dare, otherwise he would not. Which Death Eaters are needed to serve him? Dumbledore closed the pensieve, his eyes filled with worry and helplessness. The Romon Kowalski thing, you think he's crazy, and the same goes for me. But it's a pity that I can't stop the anger of the entire British wizarding community, not to mention that Guy Romon keeps adding fuel to the fire. Looking out the window at the night filled with desolate moonlight, Dumbledore sighed. Perhaps Romon's decision was really not impulsive or arrogant. Wiltshire, England. In Malfoy Manor. Since that day when he was publicly humiliated by Romon and returned to the manor, Lucius Malfoy gradually calmed down. However, after a brief period of calm, unprecedented intensity of anger burst out in his mind. Just when the Daily Prophet sent this crazy challenge news to the streets and alleys of the entire British wizarding world, deep in the mountains and forests, and even to other wizarding circles in Europe. In Malfoy Manor, dozens of top wizards from different wizarding families, large and small, gathered here. Jason Vincent looked gloomy. He was also humiliated that day. As soon as he saw Lucius coming out, he couldn't wait to speak first. Lucius, do you have any ideas? Lucius took a deep breath and tried not to think of the nightmare scene of making a fool of himself a few days ago. However, no matter how he controlled it, the moment he spoke, everyone still felt the humiliation and anger in his heart at this moment. Gentlemen, we are all wizard spawn in Hogwarts, and basically all of us are Slytherins. I just want to say one thing. Our nightmare is back and he wants to continue to dominate and suppress us and our descendants. What should we do? Chapter 32. Lucius. The entire wizarding world unites to destroy the Silver Devil who is trying to oppress us. Requesting flower reviews for new books. What should we do? In a quiet garden of Malfoy Manor, there are cronies brought by these pureblood wizard clan leaders around, and they are strictly controlling the surroundings, and they will never let what is planned here today spread out. In fact, before Romon came out, Voldemort's incident made their pureblood families feel insecure by the Ministry of Magic. However, at present, the entire British wizarding world, whether it is the Arres of the Ministry of Magic or the Death Eaters who follow Voldemort, have deliberately forgotten what happened before. Only Romon, the bold silver demon, was left in his eyes. What should we do? Of course we should take advantage of this opportunity and join forces to kill him. The first person to speak was Jason, the patriarch of the Vincent family who had been publicly humiliated by Romon before. As they looked at the other party's eyes wide open as he spoke, a cruel light gradually appeared in the eyes of everyone present. Although that guy is scary, his talent for potions is also scary. I don't believe that someone can be locked up in a ghost place like Azkaban for more than 10 years and still have superb magic abilities. Another top wizard from a pureblood family spoke. Obviously, this was another unknown senior of Romon, and it can be seen from the fierce look on the other side's face. Romon's 5 years at Hogwarts left many deep memories for him. That's right. Although that guy is obviously emitting magic power fluctuations, he is definitely not that strong. He is just relying on the protection of the United States Ministry of Magic. Haha. This guy is so bold this time that he dares to directly challenge our entire wizarding world. I want to see if the American wizarding community has any reason to protect him this time. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that everyone basically reached a united front without any guidance from me, it was very easy. Lucius's gloomy face also softened slightly. Although in his heart, he was thinking the same thing as Jason. I think Romon's strength lies in his opponent's unreasonable magic potion refining. As a pureblood family in the British wizarding world, they are undoubtedly the most powerful family in this circle. And they already know the reason why the American Ministry of Magic wants to protect Romon recently. It was for the potion formula called Merlin's second midnight appearance. However, now that Romon is committing suicide and actively provoking the entire British wizarding world, even if the United States wants to stop him, there is nothing he can do. Just in case, everyone, we must use all our strength in 7 days. After all, if such a living Romon Kowalski is left to run into the American wizarding world, it will be our doom. Everyone looked at each other with serious expressions, and nodded to each other. Master, do we really not want to interfere in Romon Kowalski's matter? Hogwarts. Professor Quirrell's residence. Quirrell took off his turban and asked carefully and flatteringly. No, absolutely don't take action, especially you. Your mission is the magic stone. Everything except the magic stone has nothing to do with you. Romon Kowalski, he is not an easy character to deal with. Voldemort murmured weakly. When I think of the incident in the leaky cauldron where I was easily discovered by the other party, but was not exposed by the other party. Voldemort still had lingering fears. That guy, the magic power radiating from his body fluctuates. Not only was it weird, but it also made him feel a strong aura of death. In his current situation, it is no exaggeration to say that Romon can definitely crush himself to death with one finger. But why? Voldemort couldn't figure it out. He didn't seem to have any connection with the other party. If it was not necessary, he would trade his head as the Dark Lord for a reputation. For today's Romon, it should be more suitable. Unless, in an instant, Voldemort seemed to think of something, and suddenly the solemn clarity was swept away, and bursts of laughter mixed with the wind echoed in Professor Quirrell's residence. Silver Demon King, haha, I really look forward to seeing you next time. Rita Skeeter was completely aroused by this time. As the news practitioner with the lowest bottom line in the wizarding world, she is now no longer in charge of the Silver Demon Lord Romon or the Silver Knight. Even though I went crazy that night with 2 or 3 werewolves who I didn't know who they were. At this moment, all she could think about was the breaking news. The Daily Prophet originally had 1 copy every day, and sometimes there was even 1 copy every 2 days. The crazy surge has reached 2 copies a day, and the content on it is all about Romon, a crazy thing that has never happened before in the British wizarding world, or even in the history of wizards in the world. Malfoy and other 17 pureblood wizarding families jointly announced that they will accept the challenge of the Silver Demon Lord Romon Kowalski in 7 days. Ministry of Magic of the Eagle Kingdom, Director Barty Crouch, Director of the Department of Magic Law Enforcement, announced that he will lead all the wizards in the department to accept the challenge of the Silver Demon King. It is reported that all members of the Encirclement will also directly participate in the battle this time. Gringotts in Diagon Alley announced that they will form a joint team of goblins to accept the challenge of the Silver Demon King. According to relevant sources, Gringotts may use the Guardian Dragon of the Vault to participate in the battle. At present, the U.S. Department of Magic has not yet responded to the challenge of the Silver Lord Romon Kowalski. According to the inference of Minister Cornelius Fudge of the U.S. Department of Magic, the U.S. Department of Magic should not be able to quickly come up with a response. The latest news in Nocturne Alley, a group of about 500 people, the Black Wizards who formed the Demon Lord hunting group, announced that they will participate in the challenge of the Silver Demon King. The Department for the Regulation of Magical Creatures of the Ministry of Magic announced that on behalf of Life, the Centaurs announced their acceptance of the Silver Demon King's challenge. Rita Skeeter listened to the latest news gathered was one by one, and her crazy laughter echoed in the office. Ha ha ha, Silver Demon King, thank you for your appearance. The Daily Prophet sends you a tribute of destruction. Oh, Romon, who had just walked out of the pharmacy, was about to say something when he suddenly couldn't help but sneeze. MMP, some reckless guy must have scolded me. It seems that I have to learn from Tom and add a curse to my name. Chapter 33 Magic Potion. The Tyrant's Crown of Darkness. On the eve of the war, new book. Please vote for flowers. Looking at Romon coming out of the pharmacy, especially when he saw the medicine bottle in Romon's hand, which seemed to contain a strange black cloud, Wednesday's eyes suddenly brightened. Is this your new work? This power makes people uneasy ... but they also make people want to get closer. Looking at Wednesday, the obsessed look on his face when he looked at the potion in his hand, the corners of Romon's mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. It was obvious that Romon was greatly benefited from the compliment. Although she is a time traveler, this little girl, Wednesday, has indeed grown up with him since childhood. It is not an exaggeration to say that she is his childhood sweetheart, and the other party's venomous personality will show up inadvertently to everyone. Now he is completely conquered by this bottle of potion named Tyrant's Dark Crown, by Romon. Came to a lounge. Romon adjusted his condition and opened his eyes again. Suddenly opened the cork of the medicine bottle in his hand. There is no proper drinking procedure. The medicine in the bottle looked like clouds, but was actually liquid. It seemed to have some kind of life. The moment the cork was opened, it suddenly rose and surged out. The next moment, it poured in from Romon's mouth and nose. Vomit. The unavoidable strong discomfort made Romon make a gagging sound, and made Wednesday, who was watching outside the confinement, nervous. However, fortunately, Romon researched the potion himself, and he knew very well what the other party's situation was. The awake brain quickly controls the magic power in the body and begins to operate on a specific route. Waves of magic ripples, with Romon as the center, quickly spread to the surroundings. The light in the room also seemed to be swallowed by some kind of power. It was clearly broad daylight, and the windows were open. The room was completely dark, and in the end, even Romon's figure disappeared into the darkness. Gudon. The oppressive and deadly atmosphere made Wednesday swallow nervously, but he had no choice but to wait outside quietly. However, she couldn't think of anything. This waiting was a full 5 or 6 days. For 5 or 6 days, in the manor where Romon lived, it was calm without any waves. However, the outside world, or the wizarding world, has already set off a storm. United States Department of Magic. Miss Goldstein, please make your position clear. You are first the director of the Operations Department of Armacusa, and secondly your sister and aunt. Listening to the angry roar of the boss, even though he has been running with all his strength during this time, this reality still made the Goldstein sisters powerless. Queenie Goldstein's legs went limp, and she sat down on the ground in despair, whimpering and then crying. Whoa, my Romon, that's my boy, he's so good. The fat man, but his body was full of famous brands, and the imposing man hurriedly knelt down to comfort him. Jacob Kowalski, Romon's father. He is now a well-known business tycoon in the American mall community. In recent years, his industry has involved media, real estate, automobile manufacturing, luxury goods and other industries. His net worth is enough to make even the Commander-in-Chief of the United States deal with him with caution. However, at the United States Ministry of Magic at the moment, as a tycoon, he doesn't have much power to speak. Tina Goldstein sighed and looked at her boss again. However, the latter's complexion was even uglier, and he snorted coldly. This is the choice of that idiot. He wants to kidnap our entire American Ministry of Magic because he is a potion master. Well, I admit that he is one of the world's top outstanding potion masters, but this is not a bargaining chip for him to kidnap the entire American wizarding world. The Magical Congress has announced that it refuses to cause conflict between the wizarding communities of the two countries due to Romon Kowalski's reckless behavior. Romon Kowalski is the greatest genius of this century, but he is also the stupidest guy in the world. Walking out of the United States Ministry of Magic in disappointment, I saw Newt Scamander, who also walked out from the other side. This legendary figure who once worked with Dumbledore to solve the great crisis in the wizarding world is now grey-haired, shaking his head slightly. No, that boy Romon, what he did this time is too crazy, and it is beyond the help of my friends. I think we can only hope for the British Ministry of Magic now. I am going to England immediately. 7 days is a long time. And on this last night, the entire Hogwarts was already buzzing with people. As the most famous magic school in the British wizarding world, and even among wizards in the world, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry has never been so lively before. God, are all these people here to participate in this challenge? It's just standing at the window, looking at the densely packed torches outside in the dark night. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled, but in the end he could not think of a word to describe his inner feelings at this moment. As for Dumbledore, looking outside at the densely packed crowd, his eyes were filled with gloom. The Daily Prophet is crazy reporting and inciting these days. He had already had a bad premonition, but I never expected that the reality would be even crazier. Fudge, I think. No. Dumbledore, do you think everything is still within our control? After walking out of the castle and seeing Minister of Magic Fudge in front of the crowd, Dumbledore was about to say something, but he was interrupted by the other party shaking his head directly. On the side, the pureblood wizard family headed by Lucius showed unprecedented madness and anger in their eyes. Lucius. Professor Dumbledore, after tonight, it will be time for the challenge expected by the Silver Devil. I, Lucius Malfoy, will definitely use all the abilities I learned at Hogwarts and give him enough respect. That's right. I've brought all my treasures this time, and I'll make sure that the Silver Devil King is satisfied. Ha ha ha. I can't wait to put my wand into that beast's mouth right now and give him a killing curse. No. You must not use the killing curse. You must not let that guy die here so easily. Yes, we must torture him severely. Make his life worse than death. Dumbledore. The excited British wizards did not give Dumbledore any face at this moment. Even among the crowd, Dumbledore helplessly discovered members of the Order of the Phoenix, members of the Weasley family, a window at Hogwarts Castle. Professor Quirrell's eyes were filled with shock when he saw this scene. Master, that guy is so terrifying. The Ministry of Magic and the Death Eaters stand together, and the Black Wizard and the White Wizard join hands to fight against the enemy. Master, I even think I am crazy. Voldemort. NND, if I had encountered this kind of situation back then, how would I have a chance to survive today? Chapter 34 Hogwarts created the devil, and will end the devil. New book asking for flower review votes. Voldemort looked out the window at the crazy scene that looked like a mob revolting. Not to mention his current weak appearance, even in his heyday, he would not dare to speak out and dare to do it by himself against the entire British wizarding community. What a joke. Avada Kedavra itself is prohibited from being used, but that doesn't mean that none of the British wizards in front of them can use it. That kind of killing curse, whoever it hits will not be destroyed immediately. Oh, Do you really think that everyone is Harry Potter and has a mother casting a protective spell to protect him? Voldemort was confident that he could defeat these people through his superb magic ability without having a slight numerical advantage. But one man against the entire British wizarding community united? Take a shower and go to sleep. It's such a pity. It seems that our Silver Devil is a bit out of his element, Voldemort said in a low voice. Everything happened today. The moment the entire wizarding world united to accept Romon's challenge, Romon had already been defeated. Professor Dumbledore, we will not pursue you for putting the Silver Devil into the school without consulting the school board in advance, but please don't interfere in this matter now. More than 10 years ago, Hogwarts created the demon Silver Devil. Today, more than 10 years later, the Silver Devil will surely be terminated at Hogwarts. Lucius came out and warned Dumbledore fiercely, who was standing in front of everyone. And at this moment, bursts of sound breaking through the air came. Several black shadows suddenly appeared in the open space not far away while changing shapes. Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore turned round, his eyes widening for a moment. Newt. The visitor is none other than Romon's godfather, Magizoologist Newt Scamander, who graduated from Hufflepuff, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Behind him were Romon's mother and his aunt, Tina, who also worked at the United States Ministry of Magic, and his father, Jacob, was retching due to apparition. We heard about the situation here and rushed over as quickly as possible. After listening to Newt's words, Dumbledore sighed in shame and helplessness. Everyone looked at the crazy crowd around them and the ones each of these people held in their hands, and their hearts tightened. Newt Scamander, the godfather of the Silver Devil, we know you, but it seems that the United States Ministry of Magic has not given our Silver Devil any protection he expected. Ha 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 ha. Lucius's sarcasm instantly caused the pureblood wizards behind him to burst into laughter. And the excitement that seemed to have killed Romon on the spot also climbed onto the faces of everyone present. For these wizards present, there was no one from the American Ministry of Magic to protect Romon, which made them win most of the challenge. No, it could even be said they have already won. It seems that our junior Romon will eventually pay the price with his life because of his pride and arrogance, Lucius said sarcastically. Without the blessing of the United States Ministry of Magic, I want to see how his bold challenge to our entire British wizarding community will end. Hearing this, Romon's father Jacob, who finally calmed down a little, hurriedly stepped forward. Sir, Romon did make some mistakes, but after all, he has been in prison for more than 10 years. This time, I think it is just a small misunderstanding. In this way, I have some industries in the United States. How about I offer you some compensation? Everyone looked at this honest-looking middle-aged man, but after a short silence, laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha. Damn the Silver Demon. It seems that the Silver Devil's magical source of mysterious confidence has finally been found. Ha ha ha. This stupid mule actually said he would compensate us. If it weren't for the fact that you are an American, I would shoot a magic spell right now and blow your pig head off. Get out of here, damn mules. Do you really think that by being with a stupid wizard, you can dictate the affairs of our wizarding world? That's right. If you don't want to die, get out of here. The ferocious wizards roared angrily and scolded Jacob. Under the guidance of Romon over the years, Jacob was also a big shot in the world of ordinary people. This behavior was scolded by a bunch of guys dressed as beggars. It also made him furious, but he still had to persuade him with good words, hoping that these people could let his son go. However, this humble reaction ushered in even more crazy abuse from everyone. Finally, someone who didn't know who it was suddenly stretched out a hand and pushed Jacob onto his back. The somewhat bulky body rolled awkwardly on the ground, causing another burst of laughter. Ha ha ha, look at this stupid pig. The Silver Devil King's brain must have been inherited from this guy. Ha 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 ha. Queenie Goldstein looked at these people angrily. If she hadn't been ordered to put down her wand when she entered the British wizarding world, she would have taken out her wand and cast a killing curse on these guys. Amidst the wild laughter, Lucius raised his nose high. In his hand is his snake-headed cane that is always at hand. There is no need to struggle in vain. At the moment of dawn, this will be the burial place of Romon Kowalski. If the anger of the British wizarding community can leave his bones. The ruthless words destroyed the psychological defense of relatives like Romon. Seeing the painful expressions of Romon's parents, Lucius instantly felt as if his soul was about to fly up. He gritted his teeth and raised his head, looking at the sky that was gradually turning fish-belly white. I can't wait to take revenge on myself for the years I was bullied by Romon today. Holding the wand in one hand, he suddenly turned his head, coldly questioned Dumbledore and others in front of him. Silver Demon King, where are you now? Chapter 35 The Disappearing Morning Light, The Devil and the Dark Lolita. New book. Please give me reviews and the monthly votes. Where did the Silver Demon go? In the spacious arena of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The sky is getting brighter and brighter, and the rising sun can be faintly seen on the distant horizon. Lucius once again asked this question dissatisfied. Being stared at by pairs of eyes full of warning, Dumbledore sat in the audience seat and shook his head very simply. Mr. Malfoy, I'm afraid you need to ask Mr. Romon himself. You also know that Romon has not returned to Hogwarts since this announcement was made 7 days ago. HMPH. Dumbledore, it's best that you didn't hide that guy secretly. Otherwise, we wouldn't mind letting our greatest white wizard of this century try to bear the wrath of the entire British wizarding world. The arena at Hogwarts is large. But even so, it is completely insufficient to accommodate such a large number of British wizards. And with the sky between bright, the night is completely gone. The centaurs in the Forbidden Forest and the goblins from Gringotts also appeared here one after another. Among the noisy voices, there were questions everywhere asking why Romon hadn't appeared yet. On the stands, the Aurors from the United States Ministry of Magic were also here, but I don't know if they were ordered by the United States Ministry of Magic to show up. But there is obviously no wand on the body. Obviously, he will not interfere in today's affairs. Captain, what do you think about Mr. Romon? He obviously has a bright future. Oh my god, a 4-star potion master. Before he appeared, the Ministry of Magic had a 3-star potion master rating at most. I don't understand. But since the higher-ups have given up on Mr. Romon, we are just happy and free. However, those pureblood wizard families are in trouble. The squibs at home are completely hopeless. HMPH, that's much better than being a gunman for this stupid brat. Kid, ha ha ha, don't look at his appearance. He is already in his 20s and almost 30 years old. The wizards were discussing. But Captain Smith, the leader, frowned. For some reason, the expression of Romon, who was closest to him that day, in his mind did not seem to mean that he wanted to use the power of the United States Ministry of Magic. However, looking at the densely packed scene in front of me, there were at least nearly 30,000 wizards. Smith finally shook his head. It seems that I have thought too much. Without the help of the power of the American wizarding community, if I want to fight against the entire British wizarding community, even the troubled Dark Lord will never be able to do it. Where is the Silver Demon King? Did he abscond out of fear of crime? At this moment, a huge roar of questioning suddenly resounded throughout the arena. Everyone followed the sound. However, they saw a man dressed as a dark wizard, casting a loudspeaker spell while looking madly in the direction of Dumbledore and others, asking questions loudly. Seeing no one answered, an even more angry roar sounded again. Where is the Silver Lord? Dumbledore, hand over the Silver Devil, otherwise Hogwarts will be destroyed today. The golden morning sun shone on the arena, but it was like falling flames, igniting the explosive barrels present. Hand over the Silver Demon King. Pay the blood debt with blood. Hand over the Silver Demon King. Pay the blood debt with blood. Hand over the Silver Demon King. Pay the blood debt with blood. The loud protests and threats grew louder and louder, and more people followed the shouts. Looking at these wizards holding wands, who may attack Dumbledore and others on the stage at any time, even Voldemort, who is hiding in the dark, is currently possessing Professor Quirrell. I also felt a strong chill. Horrible. This situation is really terrible. For a moment, Voldemort couldn't help but feel nervous. His resurrection plan might require more Death Eaters to join him. The more wizards who join the Death Eaters, the fewer enemies he will have to face in the future. And seeing the British wizards, their emotions are obviously getting more and more out of control, and even some people who were not so radical in the past, under the background of this atmosphere. Everyone's face turned red and they raised the wands in their hands. Loud and angry questions. Hand over the Silver Demon King. Blood for blood. The roar spread throughout Hogwarts, and even spread throughout the surrounding Forbidden Forest, causing the magical creatures inside to become restless. Seeing this scene, Romon's godfather Newt Scamander and others also expressed despair. In this case, words have completely lost their effect. No amount of persuasion can change the will of so many people. Just when the situation was gradually getting out of control, someone was already preparing to destroy Hogwarts. Wow! At the moment when Dumbledore and the others were completely tense, something like a hurricane suddenly roared past from the sky. The bright sunshine in the early morning was suddenly enveloped by a layer of dark clouds coming from the sky. The fierce and strong wind blew down on the arena at the moment when the sky darkened. The powerful wind blew everyone on the stage screaming and swaying, and the fierce crowd below screamed and practiced. Wordfog. What happened? Why did the sky suddenly change? This is too fast. Just as everyone was exclaiming, the smiles of Lucius and others, whose faces were full of excitement and passion a moment ago, suddenly froze on the spot. The sky became dark. It was obviously early morning, but now it seemed like dusk. What made everyone's hearts suddenly shrink was that a familiar figure appeared in everyone's sight without anyone expecting it. Silver Devil. Romon Kowalski. As for Wednesday, the little goth Lolita who was held in his arms by his side, was ignored by everyone. Hand over the Silver Demon King. Pay with blood. Hee hee, what a passionate welcome call, Senior Lucius. I saw you were so excited before. It seems that you planned all of this, right? Romon stepped on a roaring tornado in the void, slowly falling from the dark clouds in the sky. In the surrounding air, roaring thunder flashed from time to time. Wearing a jet black suit and leather shoes, he also wore a 4-star potion master's cloak awarded by the United States Ministry of Magic. The wind roared loudly. A layer of cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of Lucius and others inadvertently. In an attic at Hogwarts, Voldemort's pupils shrank and he felt the aura emanating from Romon's body. Exclaimed, "This is impossible." Chapter 36. I Am Darkness. New book asking for flower reviews and monthly tickets. Looking at Romon emerging from the dark clouds, wrapped in thunder, It was as if the real devil had come into the world. Ordinary wizards like Lucius may not be able to sense it, but as the Dark Lord, Voldemort even needs to possess Quirrell at this moment. At this moment, I can clearly feel the abyss-like dark energy emanating from Romon. Voldemort couldn't believe that Romon from a few days ago was still terrifying despite his magical energy, but it only surpasses most wizards in terms of purity and strength. There was no such terrifying dark power as it is now, and in just a few days, you were able to master such a degree of dark power. Romon Kowalski, did you sell your soul to Satan? Voldemort couldn't understand. However, he was also incomprehensible and even stood up from his seat in shock. And Dumbledore, and Romon's godfather, Newt's commander, Professor Dumbledore. Newt watched in disbelief as Romon slowly landed in the center of the arena. As soon as he appeared, the British wizards who had been excited before pressed the mute button one after another. He pulled Dumbledore aside in a panic. However, the latter was looking at Romon on the field solemnly at this moment. What Voldemort sensed, they naturally sensed as well. Ignoring the reactions of Dumbledore and others, as soon as Romon landed, he gently pushed the little goth Lily in his arms away, hoping to get her back to the Adamses. Who would have thought that the latter would not agree at all? I will not leave. There is nothing more exciting and interesting in my life than now. I will stand by your side, even if I can't do anything. Romon lowered his head and looked at the little Lily with stubborn, but more excited eyes. This girl, obviously, she was completely conquered by Romon's crazy behavior of fighting against the whole world with one person's power. She likes these deviant, even evil and crazy things. Smiling softly, Romon suddenly seemed to have thought of something. Mrs. Adams taught you the cello on Wednesday. Are you still practicing? Wednesday nodded, not sure why. Romon looked around at the wizards who were gradually gathering towards him like a tide, and the corners of his mouth curled up in a cruel arc. Then why don't you take this opportunity to show mercy and give these idiots a curtain call? Hearing this, Wednesday's eyes suddenly lit up. Romon, you really impress me more and more. With that said, he quickly took out the cello and chair from his space-folding pocket. When the pureblood wizards headed by Lucius came towards Romon aggressively, they all looked stunned when they saw a little girl actually taking out a cello. Romon Kowalski, this is a duel arena. Do you expect to use this little girl from the American wizarding world to stop us? Romon smiled coldly. But at this time, the sound of the cello suddenly sounded. The dull tone, accompanied by the passionate melody, instantly made everyone present feel a suffocating feeling caused by the oppression of darkness, and it also made Romon instantly energetic. Slowly raising one hand, like a conductor of music, while swinging it irregularly. His eyes were full of teasing and sarcasm as he looked at the guys in front of him, who had been his losers since then. Stop you? Hee, Malfoy, it seems that even after so many years, you really haven't improved at all except your shoeshine skills. I'm just letting people add a little color to a boring thing. Wednesday. Wenyan, who was strumming the cello excitedly, raised his eyes painted with black eyeshadow, and looked directly at the people in front of him, full of the same contempt and provocation as Romon at the moment. The small talk is over. Don't waste any more time, please me, stupid wizards. The extreme contempt and provocation instantly made the eyes of the pureblood wizards present who had been bullied by Romon turn red. Jason Vincent, who was standing behind Lucius and blocked by his body, took the lead. Avada Kedavra. The dark green evil energy burst out instantly, and the dim arena was full of weirdness and violence. At the same time that the death curse was being shot, the other pureblood wizards also raised their hands. With a heartbreaking voice, as if he was swearing revenge, he screamed out his own curse. Cruciate. Fuchsia. All petrified. The colorful spell struck Romon instantly, and the dazzling light caused people on the stage to scream in surprise. However, in the field, the magical energy was getting closer and closer. Romon's face showed a little excitement, and the sound of the cello on the side became heavier and heavier, as if he was pitying the beast that was about to fall into a trap. A wand appeared in Romon's hand, and a darkness that made everyone's hearts tighten suddenly spread from his feet. The rising black mist turned into a ferocious demonic hand, precisely blocked in front of the two of Romon. Boom! The fierce energy collided together instantly, and the unforgivable curse mixed with the cursed energy of black magic hit the dark giant hand in front of Romon hard. The huge energy collision and the strange and dazzling light caused Lucius and others to squint their eyes. However, the next moment, everyone's eyes widened in shock. It was as if he had seen something incredible. Wordfog. Watching the magic spell being gradually swallowed up by the giant hand of darkness and disappearing in the blink of an eye. Not to mention Lucius and the other wizards who had never seen such a situation were stunned. Above the stands, the knowledgeable Dumbledore also showed a look of astonishment. Newt Scamander, the only one standing next to Dumbledore, frowned, as if he was suspecting something, but couldn't be sure at the moment. At this moment, Wednesday, who kept playing cello in the field, had a dark and cruel smile on his face. Romon's voice seemed to be able to instantly cause fear, echoing in the ears of Lucius and others. Like a predator teasing its prey, Lucius Malfoy, the darkness beckons. Chapter 37. The Curse of Darkness and Violence, the Demon King and the Encirclement and Suppression. Please vote for the new book, The darkness is beckoning to you. In the dim light, he looked at Romon standing in the darkness not far away. The whole body is surrounded by pitch black, and the dark energy is constantly spreading towards the surroundings. The pitch black energy is like a tide, and it seems to be substantial. I don't know why, but there were still bursts of piercing screams. It was like there were countless Cornish goblins struggling in the darkness, trying to escape. Zeshite. What the hell is all this? Back up quickly. Be careful of these dark energies. Damn. What are these? Lucius. Think of a solution quickly. I have never heard of such black magic in the wizarding world. One moment, the team of pureblood wizards, who seemed to be threatening to drown Romon in a torrent of magic spells, were retreating in panic in front of this jet black energy. The screams and panic made the other wizards outside the arena, who had not yet entered the arena, feel anxious. They also hurriedly asked each other for information about the magic spell cast by Romon. However, there is no doubt that after asking around, no one can give an accurate answer. It looked like black magic, but Romon was not seen using a wand or chanting any spells. It's such a terrifying magic. It can easily resist the attacks of so many magic spells, and you don't have to recite the spell. Silver Demon Lord Romon Kowalski, how on earth did you do it? Professor Quirrell had his back to the window, and the sound of Voldemort's muttering voice on the back of his head aroused him to be extremely curious. But he didn't dare to move at all. He could only stand there tremblingly. In the arena, Romon's whole body was filled with pitch black energy, which originated from their shadow power of Obscurus, and was perfectly extracted and tamed by Romon's pharmacy skills. At this moment, it has completely become a part of Romon's body. The most intuitive improvement brought about by mastering shadow power is the major changes in the way of fighting and releasing magic spells. Dear old friends, after more than 10 years, I am really happy to see you as united as you were in Slytherin. But why have I been imprisoned in Azkaban for more than 10 years, and why do you still just keep retreating when facing me? Time seems to have not taught you that there is no use in retreating, Romon said, and then raised his hand. Amidst the exclamations of Lucius and others, the black tide that was originally spreading on the ground suddenly seemed to be called upon by something. With a crash, it instantly turned into a huge wave of dark shadows more than 10 meters high, roaring toward these people. Stop retreating. There are so many of us who will never lose to him. Everyone, follow me to attack. Lucius's expression was frantic with a hint of panic that could not be concealed. In his mind, the psychological shadow that Romon had caused him in the past was like an inner demon, crazily devouring his calmness and reason at this moment. Work together to interrupt his spellcasting. Amidst the hysterical roars, hundreds of pureblood wizards gritted their teeth, flashed, and immediately used disapparition. In the blink of an eye, he quickly arrived on all sides of the arena and surrounded Romon. When facing the huge black wave that seemed to be connected to the dark clouds in the sky, even though my heart was full of anxiety, I still showed the fighting qualities that elite wizards should have at this moment. Terrible magic fluctuations triggered a fierce storm. The people around the entire arena lowered their waists under pressure. Lucius stood in a corner, looking at Romon from afar. Seeing the joking smile on the latter's face, his chest seemed to be burning with fire. Everyone in position. Wand escape. Along with hundreds of elite pureblood wizards, they arrived at each position on the edge of the arena, facing the surging waves, as if they were carrying a magic spell that ignored the wails of the innocent souls. Everyone suddenly chanted curses and roared, "Finite! All curses are over!" All of a sudden, there seemed to be a golden light on the ground, and blazing flames instantly burst out from the cracks in the ground formed around the arena. The flames were dazzling, like the flame of hope under the dim clouds, and the British wizards, who were already a little shaken because of Romon's power, breathed a sigh of relief. Boom! Under the powerful impact of magic, the flames eroded towards the central package. However, the power of shadows surrounded by it was like a ferocious beast, roaring and driving it back again and again. In a place where no one could see, Lucius and others, who were maintaining the all curses are ending, were half kneeling on the ground, with their wands inserted into the ground. Their expressions were accompanied by the impact of magic again and again, getting increasingly ugly. Fake. Is this guy really still a human? Is this terrible attack really a curse? The muscles in Lucius's face continued to twitch. The magic power in his body accompanied the constant confrontation between the two sides in the field, and also followed the crazy collision and vibration in his body, causing a sharp pain to be felt in his internal organs. There was also a faint fishy taste in the throat. Boom, 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 boom. The two sides collided again and again, but Romon's side clearly began to withdraw its strength, until finally, amid everyone's surprised cheers, they gradually stopped. The power of shadow began to shrink towards the center under the siege of the flames. Ha ha ha, that bastard can't hold on anymore. Mr. Malfoy and the others are indeed the best Slytherins. Teach this guy a lesson. Boring. I thought we needed to play, but I didn't expect that just a purer blood could defeat this guy. However, the British wizards around the stands were happy to communicate, and even taunted them one after another. Dumbledore, and Voldemort, who was hiding in the dark, all looked tense. In their perception, it seemed that something extremely terrifying was about to appear. From underground, in the field, when Lucius and others sensed Romon's retreat, their tense hearts relaxed a little. However, before a relaxed smile appeared on their faces, The next moment, boom, roar, a roar that caused the entire Hogwarts to tremble suddenly emerged from the arena. The power of the shrunken shadow suddenly exploded, and everyone was even more stunned, as if they had seen a ghost. But it was the terrifying tentacles that were hundreds of meters long that appeared in the field. That terrifying monster formed entirely by the power of shadow. Romon and little Lily Wednesday stood towering over this terrifying monster. Welcome to enjoy The Art of My Shadow, Kraken's Abyss Table. Chapter 38, Kraken's Abyss Table, Lucius is in a demon. New book, please give me reviews and monthly tickets. Welcome to enjoy The Art of My Shadow, Kraken's Abyss Table. Looking at the scene, under the shadow of the dark clouds, the terrifying monster with more than a dozen black tentacles hundreds of meters long, waving its teeth and claws, looked like an octopus or a sea monster. Everyone present was shocked. Even Dumbledore was standing there with his reading glasses in one hand and his mouth open. Even he, who is known as the best white wizard of this century, cannot believe it. Can the scene in front of me be attributed to the level of a curse? Master, what happened? Outside ... Zeshet. What kind of monster is this? This terrifying movement at a window in the attic of Hogwarts finally made Professor Quirrell unable to bear it any longer, regardless of the fact that his master was behind his head. As soon as he turned round, he was instantly caught by the terrifying monster that occupied almost the entire arena in the arena outside the window. He was so scared that he sat down on the ground. Damn it, you loser, stand up and turn around. At this critical moment, how did that guy Silver Devil do this? Turn around. However, Professor Quirrell, who was slumped on the ground, looked at everything outside the window with fear on his face and trembling pupils. At this moment, the body is completely out of control. I wanted to stand up, but I couldn't do it after crawling for a long time. Merlin, what kind of monster is this? And those who had similar reactions to Professor Quirrell were the British wizards in the arena. At this moment, they no longer had the confidence and excitement they had a second ago. One by one, they watched the tentacles waving and stirring in the sky, flying over their heads. The powerful fear has caused them to lose control of their bodies at this moment. The buzzing sound of the cello still echoed in the scene. Like a devil's concerto, this huge weird guy has an indescribable black elegance. Above the stands, Mr. Adams, who was holding Mrs. Adams, was completely stunned at this moment. God, Morticia, look at our baby girl, she's on top of that scary big guy. Mrs. Adams looked happy. Oh, my little cutie, I feel relieved to see that her life can be so interesting. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, who happened to be standing nearby. Oh my god, what kind of freaks are these guys in the American wizarding world? Your daughter is on top of that big monster. Instead of worrying about any danger, are you happy for her? Arthur, no, we absolutely cannot fight this guy. We will not participate in this challenge. I don't want my children to lose their parents. Mrs. Weasley pulled her husband in fear and trembled. The latter was also nodding his head at this moment. It wasn't that they weren't brave enough. It was just that everything they saw in front of them seemed completely beyond what wizards of their level could handle. And it was just as they were talking. There was also a shocking reversal in an instant. Lucius and others, who were trying hard to maintain the spell, only felt a turmoil coming from the ground. Next moment, a scream suddenly came from the edge of the arena. The familiar voice made Lucius's expression change drastically. The moment he raised his head, he saw a familiar figure suddenly flying out from above their heads. From the far end of the arena, at a height of more than 10 meters, a terrifying pitch-black tentacle flew out. Boom! Jason Vincent didn't even make a second scream, and the next moment he slammed into the stands beside him. On the stone stands, a shocking pothole was exposed, and Jason was lying in it dripping with blood. His hands and feet were twisted in a strange posture, and he didn't move at all. Fuck! Just when Lucius cursed and wanted to think of a countermeasure, another panicked scream came from above his head. Lucius, save me! Ramus! Lucius' expression changed drastically, but he saw a friend from a pure-blooded family, entangled tightly by a tentacle, struggling in midair while waving his wand, shouting for help. However, the next moment, boom! The ground seemed to have been hit by a giant. The dim smoke dissipated, and the tentacles let go of the figure, but the latter was already lying on the ground, motionless. Romon Kowalski, I'm going to kill you. Lucius went completely crazy. However, Romon, who was standing high above the sky, had a cruel smile on the corner of his mouth, and fiddled with a finger casually. The next moment, a few more screams came, looking at these familiar friends struggling in pain in Romon's hands. Lucius didn't even have the means to resist and rescue. While angrily terminating all curses end, he suddenly took out his broomstick. Romon, let them go. The angry roar echoed in the arena, but what responded to him was Romon's operation that caused everyone present to exclaim again and again. Let them go? Of course it's no problem. Looking at the leather shoes that made me very satisfied in the past, as you wish, Senior Lucius. Lucius, who was a little relaxed one moment, was startled when he saw the cold and playful eyes in Romon's eyes the next moment when he spoke. No. Boom. The ground trembled, and looking at the figures below who didn't know whether they were alive or dead, Lucius' face gradually paled, and he stared blankly at Romon, who showed no guilt at all. Incredible. You killed them? Romon shrugged and smiled. You can kill me too. Lucius's heart began to twitch violently, and he watched helplessly as hundreds of people on his side were beaten to pieces by Romon in an instant, and they were not sure whether they were alive or dead. The huge sense of disparity made his inner demons finally uncontrollable and took over his brain. The unbearable and cruel memories flooded into my brain. Baby Malfoy, you can't even shine your shoes. It seems I need to teach you to become a useful person. Romon's smile more than 10 years ago, and the smile he had now when he brutally crushed their group. Nothing has changed. Chapter 39 Strong. The second bottle. Silver Knight Kraken, a legendary giant sea monster in Norse mythology. It is said to live near the coasts of Norway and Greenland. It usually lies on the bottom of the deep sea, occasionally rising to the surface and even attacking passing ships and preying on large marine animals such as whales. It symbolizes a twisted and entangled creature. And there, Shadow Curse, that Romon named after this initial research also shows how shocking the curse itself is on the visual level. Like a hellish monster emerging from the ground. With this setting, the pressure and intimidation provided by Romon, the Demon King, are instantly fully charged. Romon, it's time to stop. Dumbledore looked at the wizards lying on the floor in the arena with a solemn expression. However, Romon didn't care about him at all. Where did this go? I finally succeeded in taming this powerful shadow power. If I didn't take this opportunity to test its strength, wouldn't I be sorry for these lovely British wizards who came all the way to gather here? However, when Romon looked at the surrounding British wizards, although they did not participate in the battle, they had become extremely embarrassed due to the fluctuations of the battle. The people who had shouted at him before to kill him seemed to have turned into quails. One by one they lowered their heads. So, who will come next? Or, you can come together. Romon's voice spread. However, the scene was completely silent. Except for the roar of Kraken waving his huge tentacles, no one came forward to continue this challenge. Romon narrowed his eyes. His eyes searched the crowd. Director Barty Crouch, I have read about you in the Daily Prophet. I am still very curious about the combat effectiveness of the arrests of the British Ministry of Magic. I still can't forget how arrogant your arrests were when they arrested me 13 years ago. You even smashed all the flower pots in my residence, just to name it, and search for evidence. Romon's chilling voice instantly made the Britishers in the corner of the arena raise their heads in fear. The head of the department, Batty, turned pale, facing the gazes of the surrounding eyes. I wanted to refuse or compromise, but there was no way at the moment. After all, he does not represent an individual. If he declares cowardice, wouldn't it mean that the British Ministry of Magic has been defeated by Romon, the Silver Demon? The entire British wizarding world will become a laughingstock among wizards. Barty Crouch's mouth was trembling, and he didn't even dare to look at the people around him. But at this moment, Romon's eyes looked in another direction. Ha ha, the goblin who only has eyes for gin gallon wants to wade into this muddy water. It seems that you have blamed all the thefts back then on me. So, why don't you take action? Dirty misshapen little man. The vulgar curse that the goblins hated the most was now coming from Romon's mouth. However, in the stands, the ugly goblins of Gringotts, all dressed in human-like clothes, turned their heads elsewhere. When they made eye contact with each other, they all meant to retreat. Romon at this moment made them unable to think of a way to deal with it. And the stinky rats in Nocturne Alley. Ha ha, the Demon King's hunting group? It's a good name. I like your courage. Come on. The Silver Devil is here to give you stinky rats in the sewers a chance to become heroes. In front of you. What are you still hesitating about? Romon sarcastically, in the eyes of the people in the past, a dark wizard who had committed all kinds of crimes and had no conscience, but at this moment lowered his hood one after another, for fear that the cloak on his body would not cover anything and expose himself. Ha 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 ha. Rampant cheers echoed in the arena, but the wizards from the British wizarding world present lowered their heads in shame and timidity. Like a sheep that has been downhill. There were many people, but facing the Silver Demon Lord Romon who stood above Kraken, they didn't even dare to have the slightest thought of resistance. However, how could Romon let these guys go so easily? He has big plans. He was also very interested in the potion development plan proposed by Dumbledore and Fudge. Whether it is the research of magic, or the research of potions and the magical creatures, it requires a lot of resources and investment, and it has reached the point where Romon is now. Every planned research content means the consumption of tens of thousands of gold galleons every day. He needs gold galleons and a large supply of resources such as potions that may come from the wizarding world of other countries. However, as a subordinate of the British Ministry of Magic or the American Ministry of Magic, Romon was absolutely unwilling to work for others. However, this huge wealth is not backed by strong force. It will definitely attract a lot of coveting. Therefore, today's challenge to the British wizarding world, Romon will never allow it to end hastily in this manner. Dumbledore looked at the silent scene and breathed a sigh of relief. Although the outcome was something they never expected, fortunately, these wizards in the UK also calmed down. Mr. Romon, just when he was about to speak and persuade Romon, today's joke in the British wizarding world would end. Romon slowly took out a bottle of potion from his pocket, which glowed brightly in the dim environment. The brilliant silver light, like an aurora, instantly made Dumbledore's pupils shrink. And Snape, who was standing beside him, even lost his composure, sitting down on his seat, trembling violently as if he saw something extremely terrifying. "Romon, what are you going to do?" Dumbledore growled loudly, looking flustered, and those British wizards raised their heads cautiously after hearing the movement. The moment they saw the thing in Romon's hand, everyone's facial expressions instantly lost control. "Damn it! No, crazy man. He actually produced another bottle of that damn potion. Quick, run." "I can't run away. That bottle of stuff is enough to spread throughout the UK." Romon shook the bottle in his hand slightly, looking at the silver aurora swaying inside. Everyone couldn't help but tense up and swallowed in panic. Romon smiled evilly. "Raise your wand, challenge me, or I'll let you relive that night 13 years ago." Chapter 40 The Forced Charge of the British Wizarding World. The Devil, Evil God. New book asking for flower reviews and monthly tickets. Raise your wand, challenge me, or I'll let you relive that night 13 years ago. All the British wizards were shocked. I couldn't believe what my ears were hearing at this moment. This guy is simply a lunatic. The Aurors from the United States Ministry of Magic were also so shocked by what they saw and heard today that they no longer knew what to say. Especially Smith, who is the captain of the Auror, was staring blankly at Romon above the monster's head. If it weren't for the fact that he was still wearing the Potion Master's cloak given by the United States Ministry of Magic, at this moment, he had to wonder whether his eyes and ears, everything he saw and heard, were all hallucinations. Is this still the gentle and elegant Mr. Romon? At that age, he was able to develop the magic spell to this extent. As the Auror captain of the United States Ministry of Magic, Smith was able to be entrusted with the task of taking charge of Romon's side, so one can imagine his excellent abilities. However, he could not in any way connect the Romon of a few days ago with the Romon of this moment who was stepping on a giant creature. Silver demon Romon Kowalski ... What kind of demon? This is obviously an evil god. Looking at the lifelike and terrifying octopus Kraken, Smith couldn't help but feel pity in his eyes when he looked at the British wizards around him. "You said that since things have already happened and more than 10 years have passed, you must hold on to them. And they gathered here with such a big fanfare. Now today is considered a huge embarrassment. Romon, there is no point in continuing. Don't make the same mistake again and again." Dumbledore persuaded anxiously, and beside him, Romon's godfather, Newt Scamander, also hurriedly spoke. "Romon, you bastard, the British wizarding community has already let you go. Hurry up and return to the United States with us." Hear the advice of his godfather and parents. Although Romon understood them, he shook his head and refused without hesitation. "Uncle Newt, Mom and Dad, I have to do this today. I have a purpose for continuing this challenge. You don't need to persuade me anymore. And you don't have to worry. Just relying on these rotten fish and rotten shrimps, and the rotten and uninnovative level of spells in the British wizarding world, I will not be in any danger today." Such contemptuous words caused the British wizards present to clench their fists. Except for Romon, no one has dared to completely deny the level of British wizards since ancient times. For a moment, everyone looked at each other, and some people had silently pulled out their wands. "I'm counting to 3. If you haven't shown a level of wizardry that satisfies me, today the British sky will be enveloped by the silver aurora again." "You, Avada eats a big melon." Before Romon finished speaking, the next moment, a hysterical roar sounded. Amid the sound of piercing the air, Lucius, who was riding a broom, rushed towards Romon with an angry look on his face. The energy of the dark green killing curse blasted towards Romon's face. The next moment he was blocked by the power of shadow. After a failed blow, Lucius immediately turned the direction of the flying broom. Hula! A terrifying tentacle of Kraken whizzed past the moment the opponent turned around. The huge wind caused Lucius to sway in the air. "Ha ha ha, Lucius, I'm starting to admire you." Romon smiled, but the latter responded to him with another merciless black magic. Seeing that someone actually launched the attack first, the surrounding British wizards looked at each other after a brief moment of astonishment. "Britisher!" When Barty Crouch saw this scene, his eyes suddenly turned cold. He shouted, and took out his wand. Behind him, a group of Aurors from the British Ministry of Magic seemed to be inspired by something, or they seemed to be coerced by their Silver Knight potion in Romon's hand. One after another, they either rushed towards the arena, or took out their own broomsticks and joined Lucius's queue. In an instant, thousands of wizards joined the battle, and the sound of intensive magic spells was fired continuously in the arena. The sound broke through the air. A series of bright rays of magic light rushed towards Romon. However, they were blocked outside by the huge Kraken. Seeing this scene, more and more wizards couldn't help but join in. Even the Weasleys and other members of the Order of the Phoenix gritted their teeth and rushed into the arena with their wands. The combined curse, "All curses are ended," which was previously deployed by Lucius and destroyed by Romon, was once again released with the participation of these wizards. Finite. All curses are over. Seeing the flames rise again and wrap around himself, Romon's face also showed a look of joy and excitement. "Wednesday, watch. From this moment on, I will completely become a darkness in the hearts of British wizards that cannot be erased for life." Boom. The terrifying power of shadow exploded again. A dozen wizards riding brooms, trying to find a gap and kill Romon directly above Kraken, felt a sudden whistling sound above their heads. Next moment, a dozen people, even with their brooms, flew out of the field at extremely high speeds without even having a chance to scream. Dumbledore's expression changed and he took action hurriedly. Shock reduction and speed stop. We had just rescued a dozen unlucky guys who had fainted, and the next moment there was another burst of screams from the field. More than a dozen figures were thrown away in embarrassment by the power of a shadow. Dumbledore, this guy is provoking our entire British wizarding community. Why don't you take action? Barty Crouch and thousands of wizards joined forces to maintain all curses are ended and continued to suppress Romon's shadow power. While looking at the figure above the stands, he yelled hysterically. However, looking at Romon on the field, Dumbledore understood that once he was dismissed, the nature of today's matter would completely change. In other words, if even he was defeated by Romon, the British wizarding community can never stand up in front of the world again. Seeing that Dumbledore was delaying to leave the battle, the wizards around him couldn't care less. More and more wizards joined the battle in less than half an hour. The cloudy sky was full of British wizards riding broomsticks. And at this time, on the Gringotts goblin side, an elderly goblin slowly raised his wand and fired a signal spell into the air. Roar. Chapter 41, Super Middle. Magical Creature Feathered Serpent God. Shock. New book asking for flower evaluation ticket monthly ticket. Roar. There was a deafening growl, accompanied by the goblins of Gringotts in the sky, sending the signal. In the blink of an eye, a huge jet black monster suddenly appeared in the distant sky. The huge wingspan, combined with the body shape that is particularly obvious even under the dim sky, instantly caused the wizards in the audience to scream again and again. It's a dragon. Gringotts actually sent a full-grown dragon. With the dragon flapping its wings, the terrifying wind and waves, and the sparks emitting from the ferocious dragon's mouth from time to time, some discerning people instantly recognize the identity of the dragon. It's an adult Norwegian spiny-back. My god, Gringotts is hiding such a big thing. And even Romon turned his eyes to the sky for the first time, and the eyes of the giant dragon that got bigger and bigger in his sight flashed away. Silverlord Romon Kowalski. On top of the stands, a Gringotts elf, accompanied by the appearance of the Norwegian spiny-back dragon, seemed to have reassembled the self-confidence that had been shattered by Romon. With his ugly head raised high, he looked like he was sure of winning. Hand over the evil potion in your hand immediately, and swear in the name of Merlin to leave the British wizarding world immediately and never come back. We will let you go. Romon, standing above Kraken's head, was surrounded by exploding spell energy, as if standing in the center of a hail of bullets. However, after hearing the elf's words, Romon was instantly shocked on the spot. Walter? He pointed at the sky with a dazed face, and he had already swooped towards this side. He was talking about the flaming Norwegian Spinosaurus, with a dazed look on his face. Do you think that I need to surrender like you just because of this ugly guy who almost tarnishes the term dragon? What kind of magic does it have that can give you such great courage? However, Romon was unusually calm. Romon's parents were frightened. Oh God, Romon, watch out. Fuck, I must make you damn British guys pay the price. I will form the most powerful military company and bury you all with artillery. Romon's parents, Jacob, were so angry that they swore on the spot that they would use the military weapons of the Mole world to massacre the wizarding world. On the side, Newt's commander also looked horrified. Norwegian Spinosaurus is very dangerous, and the scales of adult Norwegian Spinosaurus are extremely resistant to spells. Romon, hurry up and stop. However, at this moment, Newt was also concerned and confused. As his godson of a magizoologist, Romon knew as much about these magical animals, especially dragons, as he did. Don't look at Romon talking about looking down on the dragons in the Harry Potter world, but in fact, these large lizards are still very dangerous. Just like what Newt said, take the adult Norwegian Spinosaurus in front of us as an example. The magic attack resistance can reach 80% of terror. In other words, if an attack spell is cast and no critical point is hit, the actual damage suffered by the opponent will only be 20% of the damage that the spell can cause. Cooperate with the opponent's poisonous fangs and the fire-breathing ability of itself as a fire dragon. The adult Norwegian Spinosaurus is not as rubbish as in the movies. But, Elizabeth, I'll leave this guy to you. Remember, it will be a very important source of potion materials in the future. Don't kill me. Under the confused gaze of little goth Lily Wednesday, Romon said something softly to the position of her wrist. Next moment, call out. Dumbledore just covered his head weakly. With a sharp roar and a terrifying thunderstorm unfolding, Elizabeth's terrifying Quetzalcoatl body appeared in front of everyone. What the hell is this? The Gringotts goblin, who was full of confidence just a moment ago, saw Elizabeth. The ugly blue-black face began to turn slightly white. The monster-like hands could not help but tremble slightly. Roar. The Norwegian Spinosaurus swooped down, and a ball of blazing flames spurted out instantly. However, the flames on its side were spitting out very quickly, but the speed on Elizabeth's side was even faster. There was a crash sound. A hurricane formed by the storm spewed out from Elizabeth's bloody mouth, and hit the flame just right. The terrible hurricane blew the flames back in an instant, under the astonished gaze of the people around. The Norwegian Spinosaurus, which originally appeared with a full tyranny index, instantly turned into a fiery red ball of light in midair. Roar. Painful wails, accompanied by hurricanes hitting each other at the same time, roared out from the mouth of this Norwegian Spinosaurus. However, Elizabeth obviously would not let him go. Romon's request was to capture him alive, but he didn't say to what extent he would be beaten. Crack, click, click. Terrifying thunder rolled up from the dark clouds, striking downwards one after another. Every time the terrible thunder fell, the ground trembled. Is this a magical creature? When this question came out of the mouth of Newt, a world-famous magical zoologist, Romon's level in the field of magical creature research was already fully demonstrated. An adult Norwegian Spinosaurus, considered a treasure by Gringotts, appeared for less than 5 minutes. It was not even possible to launch an effective attack on Romon. In just a moment, Elizabeth, their northern magical creature Quetzalcoatl, who had been beaten by Romon, was too seriously injured. He could only lie on the ground obediently and moan helplessly. And when the wizards who were originally surrounding Romon and launching a frantic counterattack looked at Elizabeth's vertical pupils, they were still fighting fiercely. It was like being splashed with ice water for a moment. Damn it, how can you survive this? Chapter 42 Dumbledore Makes a Move. Silver Demon King's favor of Not King accompanied by the Norwegian Spinosaurus. There was a roar, like a meteorite, smashing a deep pit in the open space outside the arena. The British wizards who had originally united to launch a frantic counterattack against Romon all felt an unprecedented sense of powerlessness. The Weasleys originally took the initiative to provide cover for several Ministry of Magic horrors who jointly cast All Curses Are Ended, helping to withstand the swarming shadow forces around them to prevent Romon from breaking the formation again. However, the terrifying extent of the shadow power exerted by Romon can only be experienced personally. Only then can we understand the horror in it. It often seems like a very ordinary attack, but the Weasleys need to mobilize their whole body's magic power to resist, and they can barely resist it. However, as time went by, this situation finally caused the two of them to begin to suffer from excessive physical strength. Arthur, I can't hold on any longer. Hurry up and rotate people, we won't be able to hold on any longer. God. The two of them started shouting. However, the wizard, who had not been waiting for his turn for a long time, turned around and was shocked to find out. I don't know when, but at this moment, there is not much power behind me to fight. Those staggering around were either people who had been retreated due to severe consumption of magic power, or simply wizards who had been seriously injured and were receiving emergency treatment. The two of them looked towards the duel arena again. It didn't matter at first glance, he had just been helping the Führers around him to resist the invasion and interference of the power of shadow. They didn't pay attention to the situation on the field. After all, there were 3,000 to 4,000 wizards fighting together, and there was no need for them to join the most dangerous fighting atmosphere. However, the display was like a loud slap in the face, hitting both of them hard. Looking up, the open space in the arena was filled with wizards lying one after another, unable to even climb up. Director Crouch, Arthur Weasley suddenly exclaimed. Looking in the direction of his gaze, I saw Barty Crouch, the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic, who was respected by everyone, holding an injured Ro with one hand, and kept during the attack of the terrifying tentacles, cast Disapparat. Damn it! Arthur Weasley cursed lowly, instantly cast Disapparation, and rushed into it. The figure had just appeared next to Barty. Before he could say anything, an invisible pressure suddenly made his body freeze on the spot. Boom! A tentacle swept over at this moment, and Arthur Weasley had no time to dodge and was instantly swept away. No! When Mrs. Weasley saw this scene, she felt like the sky was falling. She didn't know where the strength came from, and she rushed towards the field crazily. Boom! Seeing the terrifying tentacles suddenly striking from above her head, Mrs. Weasley closed her eyes in despair. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Romon Kowalski. That's enough. Stop it. The loud sound seemed to have a powerful effect, causing the surrounding shadow power to tremble. I don't know when Dumbledore appeared on the scene, holding the Elder Wand. The Elder Wand was flashing with fluorescence, but the weak fluorescence instantly made the shadow tentacles above its head unable to strike down. There was a short silence at the scene. Under the nervous and desperate gazes of those who were still conscious, a slightly frivolous voice came from the shadows. Well, since it is Professor Dumbledore who comes forward, I will give you this face. Looking at Romon walking out of the shadows, he was spotless. His suit was still as it was when he first appeared, with not even a single wrinkle visible. The terrifying Kraken, which was formed by the power of shadows, gradually turned into bursts of black smoke and dissipated after losing Romon's control. When the sight returned again, everyone looked at the scene, which was almost full of seriously injured wizards, and gasped. Arthur! Mrs. Weasley exclaimed, rushing in the direction of Arthur Weasley. Dumbledore was looking at Romon with murderous intent in his eyes. Yes, the strength shown by Romon at this moment, as well as his ruthless style, had already made Dumbledore, the White Wizard, successfully reveal his murderous intent. Dumbledore's voice was cold as he held the Elder Wand in his hand. For Newt's sake, I can give you a chance to explain. Why? Is it just because these people are hunting you? Romon shrugged. Of course not. Leaving aside the details of that incident, they are indeed the victims of the Silver Knight. It is indeed their right to hunt me down and so on. Dumbledore, then why kill? The smile on Romon's face gradually faded. Why? Of course it is to tell them the cruelty of reality. The strong make mistakes and the weak bear the consequences. Professor Dumbledore, this is my purpose. It is their right to hunt me down. And just like ants, being easily crushed to death by me is the consequence they need to bear. Dumbledore's breathing became heavier at this moment. He raised the Elder Wand in his hand and couldn't believe that the godson of his old friend in front of him could say such cruel words and do such cruel things. And just when he was gritting his teeth and preparing to ruthlessly kill Romon here, Romon raised his hand suddenly. Relax, I said. I'm just teaching them how to be a qualified ant. I'm not so crazy as to kill them and make me feel sick. As he spoke, no movement was seen in his hand, and a potion bottle shining with golden light appeared in his hand. This bottle of potion, I call it, the Silver Demon's Grace of Immortality. The material cost is 38,000 gold galleons. Professor Dumbledore, you should really thank our sponsor. Professor Snape, as he spoke, without waiting for Dumbledore to say anything, he threw the bottle in his hand away. Boom. The moment the golden medicine liquid burst open at the mouth of the bottle, it suddenly vaporized and turned into white gold clouds full of sacred feeling. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire place. Professor Dumbledore, put away your Elder Wand. It's better to keep this kind of thing to deal with your big problem, Senior Tom. Secretly Voldemort. Chapter 43. The Demon King studied at Hogwarts? The real nightmare has just begun. New book asking for flower reviews and monthly tickets. Zizzy. Strange sounds accompanied by white gold clouds filled the whole place, and the smell of magic potion that soaked people's hearts instantly shook everyone's spirits. Even the comatose wizards slowly opened their eyes one by one. Walter, what is this? My arm. Ah, damn it. Be gentle. Linda, thank God, you are okay. What happened to us? I remember that I should have been beaten out by that bastard Silver Demon King. Oh my God, what on earth is this? My injuries are recovering quickly, even the broken bones are recovering. Looking at the wizards who were lying on the ground in a mess, they woke up one after another like corpses, and the ones with minor injuries were able to stand up freely. Dumbledore, who had been holding the Elder Wand a moment ago and looked like he was going to execute Romon on the spot, stayed where he was. What he experienced on this day was more exciting than in his entire life. In fact, he couldn't even remember how many times today he was shocked and speechless by the young boy in front of him. Is this the power of the potion? Dumbledore didn't understand, but who of those present could understand even if they saw the whole process? As for the team of the United States Ministry of Magic, Captain Smith has been completely stunned. Captain, are these people alive? The problem of one team member was now also the problem of the vast majority of people present. In the battle with Romon just now, none of them could see that Romon was showing mercy. The terrifying monster waved its terrifying tentacles, and more than a dozen people were thrown away like cannonballs. The huge force even made small human-shaped pits on the ground. As for the seriously injured people in the pit, they were treated unilaterally by these people as a matter of course. Already died in battle. However, even if they are not killed in battle, they must be seriously injured that require long-term treatment and recovery in bed. Nowadays, seriously injured people of this level are appearing as if they are fake corpses at the scene. One after another, they slowly sat up, when the white golden clouds completely disappeared, except for the potholes that could be seen everywhere at the scene, and the Norwegian Spinosaurus that was not on the treatment list of Romon's potion. Almost everyone looked dull and in a daze without reacting. Today, they seemed to be having a big battle with the Silver Demon King back then. Moreover, the battle was unilaterally crushed by the other party. But, how come I can still be alive and kicking here? Except for some dull pain in some parts of the body, no injuries could be found. Is this really an effect that magic potion can cause? Smith didn't understand, but there was one thing he was sure of. From today on, the Silver Demon Lord Romon Kowalski will become one of the top figures in the entire wizarding world, possessing such a terrifying talent in potions. It is so terrifying that it can even be said to be equivalent to the strength of today's Dharma god. Smith could already imagine that the United States Ministry of Magic would have to pay a huge price for neglecting Romon. Hey, but who would have thought of such a thing? The American Ministry of Magic must not have expected it. After all, the British Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, was trembling the moment he walked in front of Romon. Even look at the opponent's knees that are constantly bending slightly. If there weren't too many people here, it wouldn't be impossible to just kneel down to Romon. Silver Lord, no, Mr. Kowalski, I, on behalf of the British wizarding community, would like to apologize to you. What happened today was due to the negligence of the management of our British Ministry of Magic. Listening to the other party's spineless words, the British wizards around them, even though their hearts were filled with all kinds of humiliation, had no choice but to shut up and remain silent at this moment. Romon withdrew his strength, so they can still stand here alive today. If Romon is cruel enough, it is not impossible that the British wizarding world will be destroyed from now on. The people who came here today are all adult wizards, and their children are still waiting for them at home. Looking at the British wizards whose spines had been broken by him, Romon showed a sneer on his lips, looked around, and finally looked at Cornelius Fudge in front of him. He stepped forward and patted the other party's shoulder gently. Minister Fudge, since it was a misunderstanding, now that it is solved, it will naturally be nothing. Looking at Fudge, who nodded repeatedly and smiled, The corners of Romon's mouth raised slightly. After all, as a professor at Hogwarts, I will continue to live in the British wizarding world. I will need more care from Minister Fudge in all aspects. Don't you think? What? Fudge was horrified. You won't return to the American wizarding world? Looking at Cornelius Fudge, who was almost crying, and the British wizards around him who seemed to have seen a ghost, Romon chuckled. Hogwarts is my spiritual home. I have studied in the British wizarding world for several years and been imprisoned for more than 10 years. Minister Fudge, you will not force me to leave my first home. Second hometown, right? Fudge. Dumbledore. No one expected that Romon, the god of plague, would not leave even though he had beaten everyone in the British wizarding world so hard. Everyone felt like their heads were instantly shrouded in a dark cloud. Some families with children studying at Hogwarts immediately decided to transfer their children to other schools. After all, if the Silver Devil suddenly went crazy, even if Dumbledore was present, he might not be able to save their child. Lucius, who was struggling to support each other with several other pureblood wizards, and stood behind the crowd, when he heard that Romon was going to stay at Hogwarts, he immediately decided to let his son Draco go elsewhere. Magic school. However, Romon seemed to know what these people were thinking. Calm words, due to a thunder in the dark night, exploded in everyone's ears. If I knew that there was a little wizard who didn't come to school, as a professor, I wouldn't mind a home visit. After all, I'm a very conscientious person. Looking at the smile on Romon's face, everyone felt for a moment that the nightmare was not over yet. On the contrary, the real nightmare has just begun. Chapter 44. Lucius, Draco, come to my room, and I will teach you how to shine your shoes. New book. Please give me a review and a monthly pass. The Silver Demon Lord Romon Kowalski almost destroyed the entire British wizarding world, defeated all challenges, and now he is still studying at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. There is simply no news more exciting than this news. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Arena. When Romon received a bottle of top-notch healing potion, he instantly escaped from his identity as a murderer and became a demon king with terrifying power that could destroy the entire British wizarding world. Just as the farce here ended, the injured wizards on the ground groaned and stood up. The Daily Prophet reporter Rita Skeeter, who had been watching the whole process, was walking quickly on the path leaving Hogwarts, mumbling excitedly to herself. His body was shaking with excitement. This time the Daily Prophet will definitely sell out. However, just when Rita Skeeter imagined that the Daily Prophet would become the top newspaper in the hearts of wizards in Europe and even the entire world, figures that she had never expected stood in front of her. Miss Rita Skeeter, it looks like you must have prepared a lot of press releases. Haha, a heaven-sent day that will make you tremble with excitement, right? The speaker was Lucius Malfoy, who had been ravished by Romon in the gladiatorial arena before. His clothes were already dirty and his elegant long golden hair was stained with dirt and sweat. By his side, Barty Crouch, Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore, the Headmaster of Hogwarts, Fudge, the Minister of Magic, the Goblins of Gringotts. Looking at these big figures in the British wizarding world holding wands, Rita Skeeter's pupils suddenly shrank. The smile also froze in place. The Goblins of Gringotts are not in such a good mood to waste time with this stupid woman. The adult Norwegian spiny-back that Gringotts spent a lot of effort to cultivate is still in the hands of that bastard Silver Devil. He didn't even plan to return it. If a word that might give away what happened at Hogwarts today were revealed to us at Gringotts, appeared in your newspaper. Rita Skeeter, you're going to lose more than just your job. Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge also stepped forward. Some time ago, when I was betrayed and separated from my relatives, I still vividly remember the scene when the woman in front of me led someone to break into my office and forcibly interviewed me. Nowadays, there was no emotion or anger on Fudge's face, but the words he spoke made the latter instantly shiver. Miss Rita Skeeter, today we all suffered a big loss with the Silver Devil, and those families with little wizards at home still need to continue to send their children to Hogwarts. If those children knew what the Silver Devil did today, do you know what the consequences would be? No one will dare to go to Hogwarts. When the Silver Devil becomes angry, none of us will be able to bear it. So, Fudge gently adjusted the opponent's collar with his hands, but his calm voice revealed an obvious threat. Your life, no, the life of your entire family, is all in your writing. What you write may be news, or it may be the epitaph of your family in the future. Plop sound. Rita Skeeter was so frightened that she sat on the ground. Barty Crouch was also disgraced today. He who always paid attention to notarization and law had to consider practical issues at this moment. Rita Skeeter, IRAs will be monitoring your Daily Prophet. Regarding today's events, you'd better think of a suitable news and fool the young wizards who are about to enter school. Otherwise, the Daily Prophet will end today. Looking at Rita Skeeter, who nodded repeatedly, everyone looked at each other in warning again, and then disappeared one after another. In the Hogwarts arena, Snape picked up the potion bottle on the ground and sniffed it gently. However, there was not even a single trace of the potion left in it for him. Professor McGonagall, who was called by Dumbledore to restore the scene, was even more numb when he saw the devastated arena that seemed to have been baptized by the Malfire God. Has Romon Kowalski grown to this point? Merlin. She no longer knew what to say. The former Romon was a super genius in the eyes of her vice principal. From the first year of admission to the aftermath, the powerful talent shown, even her vice principal couldn't help being a little jealous. However, she couldn't understand how Romon did it. This is simply art. Yes, I remembered, that boy Romon, when he was in school, often chanted that sentence, magic is art, it is the art of free power. He did it. Oh my god. The short Professor Flitwick kept observing the place where Romon released Kraken's abyss table. His excited chatter immediately attracted a warning look from Professor McGonagall. Professor Flitwick, I have reason to believe that it all started when you guaranteed him to study in the restricted area. After that man, we at Hogwarts have cultivated another Demon King. No, it's a more terrifying Demon King. Snape, who was carefully putting away the potion bottles, answered. The scariest thing is that Voldemort is not in Hogwarts, but the Silver Devil is. Everyone was silent. Working with a Demon King who could destroy the entire British wizarding world? My god, just hearing about this thing is full of absurdity and incredible. Malfoy Manor, Wiltshire, England. When Romon easily defeated the entire British wizarding community, the actual time was only noon. However, when Lucius returned to the manor with his wife, it was already dusk. Before the little wizards in the entire wizarding world didn't know about it, their parents had already negotiated with the Ministry of Magic to come up with a white lie. Father, mother, you are back. How is the Silver Demon King? Is he imprisoned in Azkaban by us again? Oh, yes, he may be executed. Draco rushed out excitedly. The gleam of admiration in his son's eyes made Lucius' old face blush. He couldn't help but feel a dull pain at the injured spot where he fell from the broomstick. Narcissa glanced at her husband, smiled and shook her head reluctantly. Dear, the Silver Devil has realized his mistake. The Ministry of Magic is tolerant. After all, he is also a very good potion scientist. He will serve as a professor at Hogwarts in the future. Speaking of this, Narcissa couldn't help but have a look of worry in her eyes. By the end of the dinner, Lucius looked at his son who was excitedly preparing for school in a few days. He hesitated for a moment or gritted his teeth. Draco, come to my room, I'll teach you how to shine shoes. Chapter 45, Above the Wizarding World, The Society of Truth. New book. Please give me reviews and the monthly tickets. Daily Profit, The Prodigal Son Returns. The Silver Demon Lord Romon Kowalski, a 4-star potions master from the United States Ministry of Magic and the greatest master of potions in the history of wizards in the world, after consultations with the British Ministry of Magic and wizard representatives, join Hogwarts as a teacher. Click. Romon threw aside the latest Daily Prophet in his hand. Hogwarts, in the attic where he lived. During this period of time, the British wizarding world was busy helping Romon, the Silver Demon, clear his name. He is also busy with his work at the moment. Furnish. Although there are very few things that can bring any intuitive help to me in the plot of Harry Potter, watching the struggle between Dumbledore and Voldemort, and the growth of the future savior, Romon is definitely a good spiritual enjoyment. After all, the greatest master of potions, after studying potions, he also needs some interesting things to relax his mind, doesn't he? Romon said with a smile. But are you sure you want to enroll in Hogwarts on Wednesday? You are a vampire. While Romon was using special alchemical paint to draw special magic symbols on the wall of the attic, he looked at Wednesday with a confused look on his face as he handed him the tools. When the latter heard this, he rolled his eyes. The dark makeup made her look so out of place at this moment, just like Romon, a bad guy who always likes to bully the weak. Don't listen to my father's nonsense. I don't even know where he found the genealogy of his so-called descendants of vampire counts. Besides, I don't suck blood. Romon shrugged. However, looking at the cute little gothic Lolita in front of him, the corners of Romon's lips were slightly raised. It looks like Hogwarts is about to welcome 2 bad guys. Ha ha. While the two were talking, there was a knock on the door. Elizabeth floated and opened the door. Wow, Romon. Professor Flitwick was obviously startled by the powerful aura of Elizabeth. When he was in the arena before, he saw this strange bird snake that looked like a crystal-clear ribbon. Easily solved and captured Gringotts adult Norwegian Spinosaurus alive. When Romon came out and saw the short Professor Flitwick, a gentle smile immediately appeared on his face. Professor Flitwick, I'm really glad that you didn't avoid me like that bastard Snape. Flitwick smiled sheepishly. This means that Romon has not killed anyone before. Otherwise, he would not know how to face this former outstanding student at this moment. There are big shots from the American Ministry of Magic. In addition, representatives from the Ministry of Magic from various countries have also arrived in London during this time. The International Federation of Wizards invites you and Professor Dumbledore to discuss matters. Romon raised an eyebrow. The speed is quite fast, which is still very rare in terms of the efficiency of the British Ministry of Magic. It can only be said that Romon's severe beating against the British wizarding community a few days ago played a vital role. The last time I came here, I was taken to the Encirclement for trial. Wow, I still remember that I was standing in this position at the beginning. But at that time both sides wanted to kill me. British era. In the magic elevator, I watched the scenes changing layer by layer outside. The words Romon said made other people in the elevator, especially the British Minister of Magic Fudge and others, break out in cold sweat. I don't know how to answer the call at all. Fortunately, the elevator is very fast and comes with a beep sound. Everyone arrived on the floor where the International Federation of Wizards meeting was held. As soon as Romon stepped out of the elevator, he was immediately greeted by a pair of shocked and curious eyes. I saw that there are already quite a few wizard representatives here who are dressed in distinctive clothes and obviously come from different countries. These people have also known about what happened in the British wizarding world during this period of time. It was a young man in front of him who single-handedly overturned the joint attack of the entire British wizarding community, and still while keeping his hand. Mr. Kowalski, Encirclement, representative of the German Ministry of Magic, nice to meet you. A good-looking wizard quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to shake Romon's hand with a look of reverence. This seems to be a signal. Hello Mr. Kowalski, I am the representative of the Ministry of Magic of Andorra. Representative of the French Ministry of Magic, Mr. Kowalski, our minister sincerely invites you. If you have time, you are welcome to visit the French Ministry of Magic. I am a representative of the Italian Ministry of Magic. Nice to meet you Mr. Kowalski. In the blink of an eye, Romon was surrounded by representatives from the Ministry of Magic of various countries. These big figures in the eyes of ordinary wizards in the past are now like Romon's little fans, surrounded by one after another, so that Dumbledore, who is known as the greatest white wizard of this century, they were all pushed aside. This almost star-chasing pursuit made Romon readily accept it after a brief moment of astonishment. This situation is easy to figure out, and there is no doubt that this is exactly the effect you need. An upright and powerful wizard like Dumbledore can be respected by others. However, like Romon, powerful and ruthless wizards are easier to obey. Take now for example. At the meeting, when Romon, in front of hundreds of representatives from the Ministry of Magic of various countries, stated that he was going to set up an organization, unilaterally produce and operate independently, and only accepted cooperation with the Ministry of Magic of various countries. In the past, it would have been opposed and rejected by representatives from various countries for arbitrary reasons such as the dignity of the Ministry of Magic, the rules of the wizarding world, etc. But at this moment, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic of the United Kingdom who attended in person, was the first to raise his hand. The British Ministry of Magic agrees with Mr. Romon to establish a free magic organization, the Truth Society, and is willing to cooperate with the Truth Society in the future to develop various magic potions and component research projects. Subsequently, the French Ministry of Magic agrees that if Mr. Romon has any material and personnel needs, our French Ministry of Magic is willing to help, which is also what our minister means. The German Ministry of Magic agrees. The Bulgarian Ministry of Magic agrees. The Norwegian Ministry of Magic agrees. Chapter 46 Hogwarts Train. Is the Silver Devil a good guy? New book asking for flower reviews and monthly tickets. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye it's the day when Hogwarts officially opens. However, compared with the situation at the beginning of the previous school year, on this year's Hogwarts train, all grades, including the young wizards who are about to enter school this year, were discussing the recent major events intensely and nervously. At this moment, in a compartment, Saviour Harry's sumptuous magical snacks successfully turned Ronald, who had just met him for the first time, into a little chatterbox. I saw the other party holding an ugly mouse in his arms. With a mouthful of snacks, he was telling Harry Potter the recent events in the wizarding world. Do you know? Silver Demon King. I think you must have heard of this name. He is a very dangerous guy. It is said that in order to capture him, the Ministry of Magic not only dispatched a large number of Aurors, but even pure-blood wizards. The whole family was mobilized. By the way, my father also participated in the arrest of the Silver Demon King. Harry Potter was confused. He had heard the name of the Silver Demon Lord from Hagrid before, but when the other party mentioned the name, his expression was obviously weird. So, who is the Silver Devil, and what exactly has he done, and why should we arrest him? This question stopped Ronald immediately. Regarding the events of the Silver Night, even the wizards who had experienced that nightmarish night were silent about it. To this day, the entire wizarding world hates and even hates the Silver Devil, and there are endless evil legends about the Silver Devil. However, in the circle of young wizards, no one knew what the Silver Devil did back then. Just when Ronald was speechless, thinking about how to continue his bragging career, Harry, however, stared blankly at a card in his hand. That's the bonus card inside the chocolate frog. Silver Lord, Romon Kowalski. Ronald glanced at it. Above the card was the familiar photo from the Ministry of Magic's arrest of Romon. The young look of Romon being escorted in embarrassment surprised Harry Potter. Don't look at it. Silver Devil's cards are the most common in this series. I don't know how many of them I have lost. Not only do they not look good, they are also very common, Ronald said casually, and then seemed to remember something. He glanced at the door and saw no one. Then he moved closer to Harry with a mysterious face. Harry, there's one thing you definitely don't know. Walter? Ronald took a deep breath, with anxiety in his eyes. The Silver Devil is in Hogwarts this year. It's even possible that we can see him tonight. Harry was surprised, but didn't you say that he was taken to prison? Did he escape? Ronald shook his head. I don't know, but it is said that because the Silver Devil joined Hogwarts as a professor, This year's Hogwarts will have an assessment for the new students. If they fail the assessment, they will not be able to enroll. But to be honest, I really don't want to go to Hogwarts when the Silver Devil is there. I've heard since I was a child that he was caught because of cannibalism. Walter? Harry turned pale with fright. Eat human? Exclamation mark. Can such a person become a professor at Hogwarts? Why didn't Hagrid tell himself? And just when the two of them were frightening themselves, there was a sound of pushing the door, and Hermione appeared here just like in the original book. Did you see it, Toad? Neville just lost it. However, before the two of them could answer, Hermione's eyes suddenly lit up. It was like seeing something new and strange. Professor Romon, the card in your hand, is that Professor Romon? How come you have his card? Hearing this, Ronald and Harry both looked tense. Walter, do you know the Silver Devil? Hermione was confused, blinking her eyes with a confused look on her face. What Silver Devil? I mean Professor Romon, Kowalski. Isn't that him on the card in your hand? Professor Romon led me to do the purchasing work before I entered school. He taught me a lot of Walter. However, Hermione's behavior of talking endlessly about Romon's advantages fell into Harry's ears, and it felt like hearing some epic ghost story. The Silver Devil took you to Diagon Alley, and also taught you magic? Why didn't he eat you? Ronald exclaimed loudly. His body couldn't help shrinking behind him, as if he was seeing a ghost when he saw Hermione. However, the two people's reactions immediately aroused Hermione's dissatisfaction. Shut up. What are you talking about? Cannibalism? Professor Romon is such an excellent and good person. Why do you want to slander him? Ronald was ready to curse. Silver Devil? Good guy? Exclamation mark. Was this mole cursed by the Silver Lord? Or is it that the mole world has a fairy tale about the Silver Devil that is different from the wizarding world? Just when a few people were about to quarrel, there was another sound of footsteps, and several figures stood at the door of the box. I really want to hear someone talking about the Silver Demon King. Well, although everyone is talking, but your voices are really loud. Draco walked forward with a smile. But just as he finished speaking, he suddenly noticed Harry Potter sitting in the corner. Wow, it seems that another rumor is true. Harry Potter, are you going to enroll in Hogwarts this year? I am Draco Malfoy. Harry Potter nodded. He was getting used to this kind of recognition. Draco looked at Hermione beside him. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but your voices just now were not quiet at all. So, have you really had contact with the Silver Demon King? My father also said something about him. But there is no doubt that yes, he has nothing to do with good people. Looking at her with questioning eyes, Hermione couldn't help but feel angry. Professor Romon is an outstanding wizard. I have seen him perform magic. He also told me that I will also become a legendary wizard. As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of harsh ridicule suddenly erupted from the carriage. Ha ha ha, what is this? Recognition from the Silver Demon King. This mole must have been cursed by the Silver Devil. Draco scoffed and took a step forward, eyes dissatisfied. I don't care whether what you say is true or false, but there is one thing. After entering Hogwarts, it is best not to say nonsense in front of us that the Silver Devil is a good person. That guy should continue to be imprisoned in Azkaban. If it weren't for him, why would we need the entrance exam this year? Chapter 47 The Little Wizard's Weird Entrance Examination. New book. Please give me a review and a monthly pass. That guy should continue to be imprisoned in Azkaban. If it weren't for him, why would we need the entrance exam this year? Draco snorted with dissatisfaction. However, Ronald on the side opened his eyes in surprise. Walter, is there really an entrance examination? Is that what your parents said? Draco glanced at Ronald. The aura of poverty combined with the iconic red hair. Draco recognized the identity of the other party at a glance. They were also from a pureblood wizarding family, but they were the Weasley family, a disgraced pureblood wizards. HMPH, my father is one of the members of the Hogwarts School Board. Of course this is true, but it doesn't matter. With my father's personal teachings, I can already polish my leather shoes very clean. However, Draco just raised his head proudly. The next moment, the followers Goyle and Crabbe opened their eyes in surprise. Walter, shoeshine. Why did my father say that this year's Hogwarts entrance examination is to clean the floor? He forced me to learn the magic spell to clean the floor. He even asked me to learn the Mole World's floor cleaning method. What about cleaning the floor? My mother told me I was tested for cleaning the owl's house. Everyone at the scene was stunned. Even Hermione couldn't help but forget the slander these people had just made about Romon, and looked at Harry Potter and Ronald standing aside with blank expressions. Entrance examination. No one has told me about this, and it wasn't mentioned in Principal Dumbledore's letter. Harry also shook his head blankly. Ronald on the side pursed his lips and looked confused. Hogwarts didn't say that, but my mother told me the same thing. However, they told me that the entrance exam is to catch fish in the Hogwarts lake. Draco shook his head dissatisfied. He laughed out loud. Why catch fish? I think they are worried that you won't have enough to eat at Hogwarts. Ha ha, poor Weasley. Hogwarts has a special restaurant, and there are special house elves responsible for cooking. My father is a member of the school board. He has already told me that there are many places in Hogwarts where the floors need to be strictly clean, otherwise dangerous institutions will be triggered. Therefore, the content of this year's assessment is shoe polishing. Not only to protect newly admitted wizards from triggering the mechanism, but also to develop good personal habits. With that said, Draco raised his head proudly again, completely unaware of the strange expression on Hermione's face. As a know-it-all, she spent a lot of time reading the books Romon gave him during the first semester of school. Although she was still far from finished reading it, she knew some of the things about Hogwarts Castle. It is true that there are institutions in some places. However, there is really no trigger for stains on leather shoes. Soon, when the Hogwarts train arrived at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, little wizards wearing wizard robes walked down one after another. However, everyone looked worried at this moment. My parents couldn't have lied to me. I heard that when the Silver Devil was at Hogwarts, they strongly requested me to come. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to come. They must have hoped that I would pass the exam. But how is it possible that everyone's assessment content is different? Merlin, can I go back now? Woohoo! If the Silver Devil is in Hogwarts, then we will see him soon. He won't eat me, right? Yes. Probably not. Professor Dumbledore is still here. The little wizards were talking worriedly, and Harry ran over quickly after getting out of the car and seeing Hagrid still waiting. Hagrid, I heard that there are still assessments for admission to Hogwarts? Yes. But you didn't tell me about this at the time. Also, is the Silver Devil ... really in Hogwarts? After seeing Harry Potter, Hagrid was about to say hello. When he heard this series of questions, especially after hearing the name of the Silver Demon Lord, the smile on his face disappeared instantly. Assessment? Where did you hear about it? After hearing what Harry Potter said about the assessment content that Draco and others' parents told them, Hagrid's already ugly expression became even more gloomy. Damn the Silver Devil, he is really going to poison the next generation of wizards again. Cursing softly, Hagrid suddenly saw the puzzled looks of Harry Potter and Ronald beside him. Then he realized that he had said the wrong thing. He coughed twice and had no intention of explaining to the others, and hurriedly called for everyone to board the boat. Along the way, Hagrid's expression became increasingly weird as he listened to the vague discussions and quarrels coming from other boats. Like anger, but also like pity and sympathy for someone. Until all the wizards arrived on the other side, disembarked and walked towards the Hogwarts castle. Hagrid looked at Draco, who was still arguing with the little wizards around him about the test content is shoe polishing, and couldn't help but feel a little dazed for a moment. Poor Malfoy, what happened to Lucius? Will this little Malfoy have to go through it again? At this moment, even when facing the Slytherin Malfoy who usually looked down on him, Hagrid couldn't help but sympathize. Pansy, it's impossible to make tea or something, and it's some oriental green tea. You can't even find that kind of thing in Hogwarts. Black tea might be possible. It's impossible for my mother to lie to me. Draco. The content of the assessment must be tea making. My mother said that making tea can cultivate one's character. That's what the East says. It's good for learning magic. Your mother must be lying to you. Draco was arguing with a girl who also came from a pureblood wizarding family. The latter has short black hair, thin eyebrows, and good-looking appearance, but his temperament always gives people a mean look. Everyone's arguments were interrupted in time with the appearance of Professor McGonagall. McGonagall looked at the little wizards in front of him and couldn't help but take a deep breath. Even though he tried his best to maintain restraint, he couldn't control his brain. I remember that time more than 10 years ago. At that time, Romon Kowalski was just like these little wizards. From here on, he was officially brought into Hogwarts. But now, Romon Kowalski, who seemed to have been blessed by God, was already sitting behind the door behind her. His identity has undergone earth-shaking changes compared to before. In a while, when you pass through this door and enter the restaurant, you will begin to be arranged for the sorting ceremony. But these are not what I want to talk about. More than 10 years ago, there was a person just like you, standing here, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Branch. However, I hope that there will not be a second person like that among the young wizards who come to Hogwarts in the future. Otherwise, we're going to have a huge headache. Chapter 48. Professor Romon, Honorary Headmaster of Hogwarts. After an opening that left Harry Potter and others confused, Professor McGonagall collected his thoughts, took a deep breath, and finally led these little wizards into the door of the restaurant. As soon as I walked into the hall, a burst of sounds that seemed to be surrounded by dense mosquitoes immediately entered the ears. Harry Potter and others only saw the senior wizards present, except for a few who turned their heads and glanced at them. All of them without exception either lowered their heads and faced the empty table in front of them. He whispered something to the people around him, or they frequently looked in the direction of the professors in front. It seems that there is something that attracts them. Hey, it's Professor Romon. Is it true that Professor Romon also teaches magic at Hogwarts? Hermione's surprised voice caused Professor McGonagall, who was leading the way, to turn his head slightly. And Harry and other young wizards who were about to enter school immediately looked in the direction Hermione was looking at. But at this moment, they saw a figure that made all the young wizards who had been influenced by the Silver Devil's fairy tales instantly feel their hair standing on end, sitting next to Dumbledore with a smile on his face. Behind the other party, there was a girl wearing a jet black dress and dark makeup. Next to the girl, there was a silver snake that could fly in midair. Silver Demon. It's Silver Demon. The terrified and deliberately suppressed cry caused the little wizards to feel uneasy. Dumbledore, who was still sitting in front of the stage, cleared his throat, and his calm admonition echoed in the hall. Quiet. The next moment, the hall, which was originally buzzing with constant discussions, could be heard instantly. "Wow, Headmaster Dumbledore, you really sound like a devil in your speech." Dumbledore glanced in casually at Romon, whose smile seemed malicious no matter what. Dumbledore didn't say anything, and looked around. "Before we begin the sorting ceremony, I have a few things to announce." Dumbledore spoke slowly. "Attention first-year freshmen, students are strictly prohibited from entering the Forbidden Forest. Also, our administrator, Mr. Filch, wants me to remind you that if you don't want to die a miserable death, don't enter the corridor on the right-hand side of the 3rd floor." Romon could not help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly when he heard that the figure was exactly the same as that of the school in the original plot. This kind of reminder that there is almost no money here, even after so many years, still makes him find it extremely interesting. And just when Romon was recalling the interesting memories he had here, Dumbledore's deep eyes were already looking at him. Take a deep breath. "Finally, to all Hogwarts wizard students, I need to solemnly introduce to you Mr. Romon Kowalski, who will officially join Hogwarts from today and will serve as a Hogwarts professor in the future." Romon was startled, then stood up with a smile, and nodded with a smile to the little wizards around him who didn't even dare to look at him. His eyes finally landed on Hermione, who was waving to him happily, and after a brief pause, she slowly sat down. "From today on, Mr. Romon is not only a professor at Hogwarts, but after deliberation by the school board, it was unanimously decided to give Professor Romon the title of Honorary Headmaster of Hogwarts." When Dumbledore said this, he paused slightly and then took the lead in clapping his hands. "God, this joke is not funny at all." "So from today on, Hogwarts is occupied by this Demon King?" In the audience, senior wizards were whispering to each other. However, the sound was significantly smaller than before. Romon stood up with a smile again and greeted the people around him. Then, Dumbledore spoke again. "Professor Romon will serve as a free teaching professor at Hogwarts from now on. You can understand that he can participate in any professor's class at will, serve as a teaching assistant, or emergency takeover for professors who have important matters when necessary. In addition, Professor Romon will open an exclusive course in the future. The specific teaching content is uncertain. It may be potions, defense against dark arts, or charms, etc. Interested students can contact the deans of their respective colleges. Make an application." With that said, Dumbledore looked at Romon. After Romon nodded, he stood up, took a deep breath, and looked at everyone. "I won't introduce myself here. I believe you all know me very well, so I'll just talk about a few things you need to pay attention to here." Romon pointed to Wednesday, who was wearing a black dress behind him. "This is Miss Wednesday Addams, my teaching assistant. I will tell you some of my daily teaching instructions or homework arrangements through her. Of course, your homework must be handed over to her in the end. If you don't want your hard-earned homework to become ashes in a fireplace in Hogwarts, you'd better learn what it means to be polite in front of Miss Addams." Wednesday glanced around, and the little wizards lowered their heads cautiously due to their not-so-easy temperament. Only Hermione and the crowd stared at each other with a frown. An invisible confrontation unfolded in midair in an inexplicable way without Romon even noticing. Romon's hand pointed to the side again, changing into the size of an adult's. "Elizabeth. This, Miss Elizabeth, is also my teaching assistant. However, if you treat her as Mrs. Loris, the kitten in Mr. Filch's arms, and make her unhappy, you must be careful that you become a teacher with a strong personality. Delicious snacks named after you." As soon as he finished speaking, all the little wizards present could not help but shudder. He. "Don't worry, the master is lying to you." "My dear little cuties, I'm actually very easy to get along with." Elizabeth's soft voice came out of her mouth. However, this seductive voice, combined with her terrifying appearance, instantly scared some young wizards, and their eyes instantly became moist. Seeing Romon finally sit down slowly, Professor McGonagall, who was also nervous and worried that Romon would do something extraordinary, hurriedly took out the list in his hand. "All right, now the sorting ceremony begins." Romon, who was sitting next to Dumbledore, looked at the sorting hat held by Professor McGonagall and couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly. "It's a smart hat. To be honest, I was wondering just now, if that guy tortures me with that off-key tune again, can I resist giving it a modified version of a torn-apart shot to make it fall apart? It has a long memory." The sorting hat was not far from Romon, and when he heard Romon's words, he couldn't help but tremble. "Fortunately, I was smart enough not to continue the annual torturing school song of the little wizard in front of the Silver Demon King. Otherwise, I would have been shattered into pieces at this moment. The most important thing is, if Romon makes a move, Dumbledore probably wouldn't be able to stop it in time." Professor McGonagall read the list. Hannah Abbott. Romon. Sure enough, she is indeed a strong-willed Hannah and a smooth academy. Chapter 49. Professor Snape, your godson doesn't seem to like you very much, Hufflepuff. Looking at the two braids, after getting the answer from the sorting hat, Romon walked towards the Hufflepuff dining table with a red face. While applauding gracefully, Romon couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly. "Before traveling to this world, I only noticed the three protagonists. However, after actually arriving in this world, Romon discovered that these small characters in the original plot also had interesting and attractive features." Professor Romon, I I'm Quirrell, nice to meet you. While Romon was watching Professor McGonagall sorting these young wizards into different schools one by one, a voice with obvious flattery and timidity came from the side. Without looking, the slightly pungent smell of garlic told Romon who it was that was already speaking. He glanced at Quirrell, who was wearing a turban, but Romon had no intention of shaking hands with him. Sorry, I'm actually a bit of a germaphobe, so shaking hands is not necessary. In addition, Professor Quirrell, I need to tell you one thing in advance. I am not interested in you at all, as long as you cannot be tainted by your disgusting garlic smell. The air around me. Quirrell was suddenly embarrassed and didn't know what to say. The movement here was noticed by some wizards, but the person who spoke was Romon. Quirrell could only lower his head in embarrassment at this moment and concentrate on the food in front of him. Did you see that, Harry? This is the Silver Devil. My father said that guy likes to bully the weak. Ronald stood next to Harry and muttered quietly. Hermione, who was standing next to them, suddenly frowned in annoyance. Just as she was about to say something, Professor McGonagall on the stage had already called her name. Hermione Granger. When the little body passed Ronald, he gave him a hard elbow and expressed his dissatisfaction in the latter's cry of pain. Looking at Hermione, who was sitting on a chair and wearing a wizard's hat, Ronald covered the place where he was pushed and cursed in pain. Only a bad guy like the Silver Demon would defend a guy like that. Harry, this guy will definitely go to Slytherin. This has always been the case. All the wizards from Slytherin are bad, while all Gryffindors are upright people. However, the words were not finished yet. The next moment, Gryffindor. Professor McGonagall's announcement instantly froze the expression on Ronald's face. Walter, why was such a bad guy assigned to Gryffindor? After Hermione got off the chair, after hearing the result of her sorting, she did not go towards the Gryffindor table immediately, but turned to look in the direction of Romon. After the latter nodded to him with a smile, Hermione sat down in Gryffindor's seat with a look of joy on her face. It can be seen that this Miss Hermione is very satisfied with our Professor Romon. There must be something special about you that attracts her. Dumbledore suddenly said Romon with a smile. Looking at the other party's eyes that were shining with strange light, Romon immediately knew that this old guy was planning something again. Savior Harry Potter's plan to pave the way. Romon really has no interest at all. In fact, Romon really sneered at Dumbledore's behavior of not wanting to become stronger and then defeat Voldemort, but instead placing his hopes on Harry Potter. Yes, I am indeed more interested in this smart mole lady than James Potter's idiot son. As he spoke, Romon turned round, as if he had discovered something interesting. He glanced at Professor Garlick, who stood between him and Snape. The latter immediately timidly held his plate and hid aside. Regardless of his arrogant behavior at the moment, he was once again seen by the little wizards at the scene. Romon sat next to Snape with a playful expression. The latter was still staring straight at Harry Potter, who was about to be sorted, but did not notice Romon's approach. Look at his eyes, he looks so much like classmate Lily. Snape nodded, then finally reflected. In an instant, it was as if he had been greatly frightened. He was about to stand up suddenly, but unexpectedly, a hand pressed down on his shoulder. First, press him firmly into the seat. Ha ha. Professor Snape, why are you so excited? Even if you see your godson, you have to pay attention to the occasion, right? Romon smiled, a laugh that made Snape's body feel hairy. What on earth are you going to do? He's just a kid. Snape warned through gritted teeth in a voice that only the two of them could hear. However, Romon raised his eyebrows. That's a touching expression, Professor Snape. However, there seems to be something wrong with the way our classmate Harry looks at you now. Professor Snape, your godson, doesn't seem to like you very much. Hearing this, Snape turned his head. But he happened to face Harry Potter, who was covering the stinging scar on his forehead with one hand and staring at him with confusion and suspicion. Ignore what Snape and our savior think for the moment. Soon, with the last little wizard, the sorting was completed. The sorting ceremony was officially over. Looking at the little wizards sitting in their respective sorting seats just like in the original novel, Romon couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly. But at this moment, Ronald and others were still wondering about another thing. So, when will the entrance examination be held? We seem to have officially completed the branching. Harry didn't know, but the know-it-all lady beside him sneered, shook her head and said nothing. Eating from his own plate, at the Slytherin table, Draco and others were also confused. Draco grabbed his own space-folding pocket with one hand. Inside was a brush and the like that his father had bought specially for him to use for polishing leather shoes. Around him, Goyle, Crabbe and others were in a similar situation. In other words, the little wizards who entered Slytherin this year already have pockets full of things. Does the branch assessment take place after we have dinner? Draco couldn't understand, and he couldn't help but wonder, was there really such a thing as an assessment? But when he thought of his father's seriousness and meticulousness in teaching him, Draco couldn't help but shook his head. How could he doubt his father? Sudden. Pansy, look, what the Silver Devil is drinking now seems to be Oriental green tea. Hearing this, Pansy, who was also struggling with her tea-making skills and went to start the assessment, suddenly turned her head. On the stage, Wednesday was pouring tea to Romon, who had just finished his meal. Miss Wednesday, it seems you have a lot to learn. Chapter 50 Ghost. The bloody Barrow who is against Romon. New book please give me reviews and the monthly tickets. Noway. The little wizards of Slytherin, as if they had thought of something, stared at Romon who was sipping tea calmly on the stage with shocked and incredulous faces. Turning his head stiffly and looking aside, Pansy Parkinson, who was sitting on a seat and holding a beautiful porcelain teapot in his arms, made a bad guess in everyone's mind. At this moment, Miss Pansy also immediately thought of one of the possibilities. Stiffly, he put the teapot he was holding carefully back into his pocket again, lowered his head, as if caught in some kind of thought storm, and dealt with the things on the dinner plate in front of him dumbly. On the other hand, Draco and the others looked at each other in astonishment at this moment. An emotion called shame began to spread before each other. Merlin, this is absolutely impossible, my father. Draco frowned, but he couldn't help recalling the details of his father teaching him to shine shoes in his mind over and over again. Draco, you have to remember when you go to Hogwarts, obey the professor's order, don't ask why, especially Professor Romon, remember. He doesn't like to be disobedient, especially. He is far inferior to him in terms of ability. If you really have no choice but to make a mistake in front of him and be punished by him for doing something, remember, no matter how outrageous what he said, even if you were asked to pick off the monster's head, you must agree right away. Professor Romon himself is not a person who pays special attention to his image. Sometimes he can even appear very sloppy in front of people, but this is not the reason why you can face him with a sloppy image. Remember to dress neatly and behave appropriately. Draco, Professor Romon doesn't like. Draco held his head. At this moment, he finally reacted belatedly. My father, when he was teaching himself during that time, he almost always talked about Professor Romon or something, and it seemed that he didn't continue to say the name Silver Demon King since he came home that time. So, my father taught me to clean the floor. Is it also to serve the Silver Demon King? Merlin, this is absolutely impossible. Goyle, who was sitting next to Draco, cursed angrily and incredulously. Romon doesn't know it yet, because of the good memories he gave to others back then. Many old friends have passed on their experience to their children. At this moment, he was teasing his first assistant, Miss Wednesday, with a face of embarrassment. Let Miss Wednesday, who has a dark wind and is dressed as a bad girl, be forced to show her sweet and lovely side, and even do this kind of work of serving tea. It has to be said that Romon actually somewhat recognized the evaluation of Lucius and his fellows back then. This guy is a born bad seed. And in the dining room, when everyone was enjoying the dinner with the sound of the wind, there was a sudden gust of wind. Grey and white figures flew out one by one from under the table, on the wall, and even on the ceiling. Oh ho ho ho, the smell of fresh little wizards. Hogwarts welcomes you. Come and take a look. There are more little girls in Ravenclaw this year than in previous years. Hello, smart girls. Senior students have long been accustomed to these sudden ghosts. Except for some new little wizards who were startled by the ghosts that suddenly appeared from under the table. Basically no one had any big reaction. They greeted each other as if they were meeting old friends. Suddenly, at the Gryffindor table, a ghost was waving a sword and scaring the young wizard. As if sensing something, the movements of his hand suddenly stopped. Looking back towards the direction of Dumbledore and the others, I felt a familiar scent. Aha! Romon Kowalski, little guy, we haven't seen each other for many years. Back then, you wandered around the castle every night. And you added a lot of fun to me. Seeing the bloody Baron flying in front of him, Romon paused slightly while holding the teacup, although there is still a smile on his face. But the look in his eyes at this moment was definitely not friendly. If there is anyone in this world who dares to seek trouble for himself so recklessly, it must be this ghost in front of him. Ghost, bloody Barrow. When I was still at Hogwarts, this guy often caused trouble for me when I was exploring the castle, either to attract filch, or to report to the nearest professor. It was this guy who delayed Romon's entry into the restricted book zone until the second semester of his second year. He looked at the bloody Barrow floating in front of him. Romon's eyes narrowed slightly. He is not a broad-minded person. He had ruined so many things by this guy, so he naturally looked for and studied ways to deal with ghosts. Unfortunately, however, even though he has learned, calling God for guardian, through self-study, he can fight against the Soul Eater who is also an undead, but he cannot affect the ghosts who are also undead. Oh ho 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 ho. That little guy back then is now a professor at Hogwarts. Romon Kowalski, luckily you are back again. Ha ha ha, the boring days seem to be starting to become more interesting. Here, the blood man bro, who was waving a long sword that didn't exist in his hand and kept penetrating Romon's body, naturally immediately attracted the attention of the little wizards around him. On Slytherin's side, the people who were still in a low mood, saw that their Slytherin ghost was able to provoke the Silver Demon King in such a way, and the other party seemed to have nothing to do with him. Everyone's face couldn't help but show a happy smile. Ha ha, finally this annoying guy now has a rival in Hogwarts. This is the first time I discovered that Mr. Bloody Barrow actually has such a cool side. Dumbledore looked at Romon, whose expression was gradually becoming a little strange. Even though the Bloody Baron was a ghost and a dead person, at this moment he had to worry about the other party's provocative behavior. Okay, Mr. Barrow, now we need to let our little wizards go to rest. They will face a lot of wizard classes starting tomorrow. As he was leaving, he didn't forget to see bloody Barrow waving his sword provocatively at him. Romon said nothing, but when he looked at the other person, there was a light called a predator. Thank you, my old friend. I was quite confused at first. I didn't know where to start with my next research. Immortal ghost, haha.